Hello and welcome to Young Guns, where we talk sports in an unbiased manner. We give you the complete thoughts and opinions around the league. I'm your host, the awesome Buckeye Mike, and I'm here with the best group of people in college sports. I got Jackson, Austin, the one and only, the GOAT, Jeffrey from Only Talk Sports. Tonight, we're discussing the top 25 of the college football playoff and our own top 25. Grab your popcorn, sit back and enjoy, and let's talk some football. All right, gentlemen. So, the committee has come out for the fourth time this year and decided here's our top 25 for this coming week going into championship week. At number 25, the committee said NC State. At 24, the committee said Mississippi State. That Egg Bowl win must have looked really good to them. At number 23, North Carolina. Oh boy, that didn't look good. Number 22, UCF. Number 21, Notre Dame. Will, on to you.
Oh, I don't know. I think that Notre Dame's too low. I mean, I know we have 4 losses, but I feel like the way that we're playing now, I feel like we should be ranked higher. Do you guys agree? Or
Well, to answer your question, since you asked this, I mean, the problem is they still have the bad losses to Stanford and Marshall. I mean, that's the thing. If you didn't have those bad losses, you would be higher because you are playing better now. But that's the thing.
All right.
Yes.
Do you want me to do my 25 to 20?
25 to 21, yes.
Okay. So for me, number 25, I got Purdue. They're coming in hot. They're in the Big Ten championship, and congrats to them for doing that because they haven't been in it yet. And then 24 for me is UNC. I mean, they've been sliding pretty hard, but, they did have that great start. And for 23, for me, I have NC State because they beat UNC head-to-head, even though they don't have their quarterback, which I thought was pretty impressive. Number 22 for me is Baylor. Tough loss to Texas to end the season, but Dave Rand still got that program on the right track. Jeffrey gave me the eyebrow. And 21 for me is Washington State. I mean, I thought they fought. What is that?
Oh my After God. That big loss to Washington,
I
give you props for putting Purdue in because if Michigan does beat them, it's a ranked win. And then obviously, I would assume with North Carolina and NC State, you determined the head-to-head was your biggest factor with that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like they've had an impressive season. They've really pumped their program up. So yeah.
All right, now let's hear from the GOAT himself, Jeffrey.
Yeah, real quick on Will, man. Your rankings are cool. I love them, man. But how is Baylor in the top 25? They got too many losses, man. I don't know. The other ones I can maybe see, but not Baylor. My top 25 to 21, I got North Carolina at 25. Only reason why I have them ranked is because they only have 3 losses. I know NC State, the head-to-head thing, but NC State, they have 4 losses. And Carolina has 3. Both teams, their strength of schedules are poor, but I went with Carolina because they have less losses. Now, number 24, I give props to the Roadrunners. They've played well this season. I mean, they only have a 2-point loss to Houston, and they have a 19-point loss to Texas. But beside that, they've won all their games in Conference USA. I give them props at number 24. 23, I got Mississippi State. They're a 4-loss SEC team. They've been really solid this season. Outside of a couple of bad losses, they've been, getting blown out to better teams in the SEC. They've been really solid this season, so they definitely, in my opinion, deserve to be in the top 25. UCF, I have at number 22. They've kind of struggled lately, but they still have looked like a really competent football team. And UCF is a brand, whether people like it or not. That's why, in my opinion, they should be ranked. And they're going to be going to the Big 12. So UCF is at 22. And at number 21, I have Texas. Texas has been inconsistent all season, but at times they've looked like a great team and they've looked like a top 15 team, and other times they've looked like an unranked team. So I split the difference and have Texas at number 21. Those are my top 25 to 21.
Before we go on, Will, do you have a rebuttal to Jeffrey's statement?
One thing I kind of have a problem with is that you said UCF's on there just because they're a brand. Is that the reason that they're on the list, or
Jeffrey?
No,
they're a brand?
they've played well. That's not the only reason. I'm just
Okay.
saying that they've played well enough to be in there. Obviously, they've played bad lately, but injuries have played a factor. John Rice Plumlee's been out lately, and when he was in, they looked really good. And they still have that one over Tulane who's in there. So they deserve, in my opinion. I worded it wrong because I was trying to say it really quick. Not just because they're a brand for a smaller team. They play well this season.
All right. Now, with that, what do you got to say, Jackson?
My 25 to 21. My 25 is North Carolina. My 24 is Texas. My 23 is Purdue. Hey, somebody's got to put Purdue there. Mississippi State, number 22. Love that Egg Bowl victory. And UCLA is number 21.
That sounds
I have a
very
question
low.
for you, Jackson.
Yeah.
Why do you have UCLA so low? They beat Washington and they took USC to the limit. And they gave Oregon everything they had.
One reason.
And they beat Utah.
One reason. That home loss to Arizona.
You think that's enough weight to overshadow their wins over Washington and Utah?
I'm afraid so.
I have to disagree with you on that one, partner. I think those two wins overshadow that bad loss. I get it. It was to Arizona, but I just disagree, my friend.
How come you didn't
I think
say
those
anything
two good
about
wins should be
Baylor?
able to. That's another story for another time. I just believe UCLA is a little higher. I get it why you feel that way, Jackson, because of the loss. I get it. It's bad. But I believe if you have some quality wins to make up for it, it should make up for it. That's just my personal opinion.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Jeffrey, didn't you ask Jackson why Baylor wasn't in his 21 to 25?
Oh, no, I was saying, how come Austin was more upset about UCLA being so low, or beside the fact that Will had Baylor in the rankings at all? That was my point.
That's a good question. So on to you, Austin.
On to me. At number 25, I have NC State. Number 24, I have Mississippi State. Number 23, I have North Carolina. They're still a good football team in my eyes. And yes, the Georgia Tech loss did hurt them. But I still believe North Carolina is a top 25 team. Number 22, I have Texas. And number 21, I have UCF. Because UCF has quality wins over Cincinnati at home, and they're going to be playing for the American Championship. And that's my top 25, 21 to 25, excuse me. Mississippi State, they've had some good quality wins. The Egg Bowl, they beat South Carolina this year, who we will see probably in the rankings coming up. And NC State, they played all year without their quarterback, and they've beaten a good Wake Forest team. They've beaten Syracuse, and they played Clemson really tough and played Florida State really tough.
So it sounds to me like we all kind of have a rough agreement with the committee in this section. Rough estimate. So for me, I want to mention first, I have, not in any particular order, Cincinnati, Ole Miss, Louisville, Purdue, and UTSA right outside on the bubble. So if Purdue can pull it off, for instance, Maybe they'll pop into the top 25. Same thing with UTSA. They are the defending Conference USA champions, so there is that in their favor. My 25 to 21, I have North Carolina. I'm sorry, but a loss to Georgia Tech followed by a loss to your in-state rival, you have to be held accountable for both of those, and it doesn't look good on you for losing to them. 24, I have NC State. I favor the head-to-head in this because NC State did win the game. 23, I have UCF. They've been hot lately. They were on pace to slaughter a USF, a 1-10 USF, mind you. The only reason they didn't was Bryce Plumlee. He did get hurt. 22, I have Mississippi State. Give you full credit for the Egg Bowl win, and you deserve to be in the top 25 for that. And 21 is Texas. Texas has been a roller coaster, as everyone has said, but they also destroyed Oklahoma. They destroyed Kansas, and they beat Baylor. So, with that being said, one at a time, does anyone have any rebuttal or questions for me?
I'd like to add North Carolina, I have them a little higher than you do. Do you think on a neutral field that you said you hold the head-to-head win for NC State? Let me ask you, do you believe North Carolina is still the better football team than NC State?
I believe that North Carolina, if it was a neutral site, best out of 10 kind of thing, I believe North Carolina would edge it out, maybe a 6-4, 7-3 kind of thing. Like it did happen to be one of those times that North Carolina didn't show up. I felt maybe they were looking ahead. The offense was just poor in the beginning, and it seemed like it took forever to gather along. But a neutral site, anything is possible. It could be a coin toss at that point.
I was just curious about that because I gave North Carolina a little more respect. I'm like you, the NC State win. I do hold that against them, but I believe that at the end of it, North Carolina is the better team, and they still have better quality wins, in my opinion.
That makes sense. Jeffrey?
My point off of that on the North Carolina NC State thing, I kind of already touched on it. Head-to-head doesn't matter to me as much. It just doesn't. I know a lot of people do take that into account, and it matters. Head-to-head does matter, but North Carolina's looked like a better team the whole entire season. They're struggling right now, but throughout the season, they've looked better than NC State. NC State has 4 losses. North Carolina's 3. Records don't always matter to me either, but that's why I have North Carolina in the rankings, and I don't have NC State in at all because the ACC's just been bad this year. There's no quality in that league overall, and I don't think NC State deserves to be in there, even though if they had Devin Lear, they probably would be. But North Carolina's been better throughout the season. I also wanted to point out real quick as well, thank you, Austin, for putting UCF in there. Good to point out since the Cincinnati win as well. UCF's just been a solid team throughout the season. Yes, they've struggled lately, but it's been a lot of injuries and stuff. And I know it kind of applies to NC State as well. But UCF's done enough for me to be ranked, and I'm glad you put them in as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
Nope.
All right. So from there, we're going to talk 20 to 16. The committee said at number 20, Texas. Number 19, South Carolina. Number 18, Tulane. Number 17, UCLA. And number 16, Oregon. Will, your thoughts?
I like how they gave Tulane a lot of credit. I mean, in general, I usually don't give them this much credit, but like Tulane, such a big road win. I like how they gave them a nice little bump. And for mine, at 20, I have Texas. At 19, I have Tulane. At 18, I have UCLA. And then 16, I have Oregon.
Who is your 17?
Hmm?
Who is your 17? You skipped from 18 to 16.
Oh, my bad. 17 was Oregon, and then 16 Oregon State. I'm making a bit of an adjustment from my different poll that I made because I was very anti-SEC, and I'm trying to balance it out.
Understandable. Anybody have any rebuttals for Will?
I have one question. Will, you have Oregon State at 16? And after seeing the wins that they have put together, especially this past weekend, what kept them out of your top 15? I'm curious.
What kept them out of my top 15? Well, the loss to Utah was ugly. I mean, I know playing at Rice Eccles was hard, but they kind of folded. I mean, I like the Beavers, but I just felt like top 15 was a little much just because of that bad performance against Utah.
That's fair enough. I understand. But do you think that their body of work, like, should my question would be to you, Will, is if a team like Oregon State, who has put these wins together in the body of work and have shown their consistency, should it overshadow that one loss?
I mean, maybe it should. I mean, maybe I could move like Florida State or Kansas State down, but I don't know. Like, I just didn't want to be too generous towards them, but like, I guess I could have moved them up.
That's fair. I understand. I was just curious why you had them at 16 and not in your top 15 quite yet. I get it. Thank you.
All right. Now it's time for the GOAT.
Yeah, my top 20 to 16. I got Notre Dame at 20, and I almost had them lower, but Notre Dame's been impressive lately. The losses to Marshall and Stanford are awful. I mean, to be frank, if this is where I go to the brand thing, I shouldn't have said UCF was a brand, but I meant from the group of 5 level, and they've played well this season. But Notre Dame's only ranked where they're at because they're a brand. And I know if there are people in the chat that are mad, Will's mad, but that's a fact. That is a fact. They're a brand. Texas and Notre Dame have been propped up more because they're brands. Only reason. It's a fact. 100%. Notre Dame's good. I have them higher because they've been really good lately and they're a brand. But if they weren't a brand, they'd be lower. South Carolina's at 19. They've played well lately. Obviously, I would have them even higher than this, but they struggled again. They played bad against Missouri and they played awful against Florida. Those two performances are what's dragging them down from being even higher. But I have them at 19 because of their performances against Tennessee and Clemson are just unbelievable. But you have to edge that out with the bad loss to Missouri and the horrible loss to Florida. That's why they're not higher. Tulane's at number 18. I agree with the fact that Tulane is playing. They're playing fantastic this season, and they do deserve a lot of credit for the way they've played. And again, they were a really good team last year, but the injury bug got them, and they're playing well this year. So I got them at number 18. They have a lot of good wins they have the Kansas State win. That's the big one. They have the Kansas State win, and they've played really well in the American. At number 17, I have UCLA. Again, to Jackson's point about how UCLA, that loss to Arizona was bad, but they have played well at other times this season. So I don't think they should be that low, but they are the lowest of the big ones in the Pac-12 for me because of the fact of the big teams, because of that performance against Arizona was bad. And I have Oregon at number 16 because Oregon, they've dropped the ball lately. I know those were two very, very close losses against two very, very good teams in Washington and Oregon State. But Oregon, I have at number 16 because they just haven't done enough to be higher than that. But again, they're still a really solid team, but they're at 16 for me.
Does anyone have any questions for Jeffrey?
I have one for Jeffrey. It's the UCLA one. I know I may sound like a broken record, but I gotta ask. So Jeffrey, what exactly did you? I know you mentioned the loss to Arizona. Are you in the belief as me that their wins over Utah and Washington and their close loss to USC is what kept them from being lower than they are?
Well, I mean, for sure. I mean, they have good wins. I mean, it's kind of like the Notre Dame thing. If you hadn't have lost that game, you'd be way higher than this. UCLA, if they hadn't lost to Arizona, would be like 11th or 10th right now. They blew it. They played atrociously against Arizona. They should not have lost that game. I mean, I have them higher than Jackson. At least I don't have them 21. 17 is good. They would be higher if they hadn't lost that game. They're still a really solid team. That's not the only performance that I based it on. They have played well this season, but they're the lowest of the big Pac-12 teams for me.
Okay.
My turn.
Go ahead, Jackson.
All right. My 20 is Central Florida. My 19 is Florida State. My 18 is Clemson. Sorry, Clemson fans. My 17, you're gonna love this, Will. 17 is Notre Dame, and my 16 is South Carolina.
Does anyone have any questions for Jackson?
Wow. I have one. No respect for Florida State or Clemson. Wow.
Maybe they're higher.
I know Clemson hasn't. I know Clemson hasn't played quite as well, but they're still Clemson. They still beat NC State. They've beaten Florida State this year, who you have behind them.
Well, Clemson has that head-to-head win over Florida State, but South Carolina has that head-to-head win over Clemson. Notre Dame has that head-to-head win over Clemson and North Carolina. So they basically kind of own the ACC in a way this year. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
That's fair enough.
I understand some of you guys are really into the head-to-head, and that's fine. You guys can be. That's cool. But how can you put a 4-loss team that has losses to Missouri and Florida over a 2-loss Clemson?
They scored 63 points against a Tennessee team with a healthy Hendon Hooker.
They scored 6 points against Florida.
I know. But then they turned it around and scored 63 points against a Tennessee team with
Hendon Hooker. You. I have South Carolina
and they ended a 7-game losing streak against their main rival, Clemson.
I respect your rankings, man, but you can't have them over Clemson. You just can't. You can have them over Clemson for sure. But generally, you can't have them over Clemson. The thank you, committee, for not having South Carolina over Clemson. Thank you.
Is that all the questions for Jackson? All right, Austin, your turn.
All right, so at number 20, sorry, Will, love you, buddy. Number 20 is Notre Dame, 19 Tulane, 18 Carolina, 17 Florida State, and 16 Clemson.
Who was your 19?
And the reason why I put Tulane.
Okay.
I believe, and I'll explain just a little bit. So I agree with Jeffrey on why Notre Dame is 20. Same reasoning. Yes, you have 2 good wins. You did beat Clemson. You did beat Clemson. That's a good win for Notre Dame. But the fact that you lost to Marshall and Stanford, that's a knock against you. I'm sorry. Like, you lose to at least one of the worst teams in football in Stanford. Yeah, I'm going to hold that against you.
I mean, that was early in the season, man. Come on. That was so far away.
But it still counts.
You still lost to them. I'm sorry, Will.
Here's the thing. If they were 10-2, happen to pull off an upset against USC, the committee would still look at the resume as a whole and still, to this day, hold Marshall and Stanford against Notre Dame, which would bring them down.
And the reason why I have Tulane at 19 is because they have the victory over, of course, Cincinnati, and they're going to play UCF in the American Championship, which is a big thing for their program. And then the reason why I have Florida State and then Clemson is I hold the Clemson victory over Florida State more precedence. But I agree with Jeffrey. You can't have South Carolina over Clemson. I'm sorry. I I have South Carolina at 18, as far as I could go with them. Because, as he said, when you score only 6 points against the Florida Gators, I get it. They dominated Tennessee and they beat Clemson and ended their 40-game home winning streak. That's all great and stuff. But you look at their, as you just said, Buckeye Mike, you look at their complete resume. Those two losses are gonna hold them down, and that's mine reasoning for that.
And off of your point of that as well, you got to remember that with Tennessee scoring or South Carolina scoring 63 on Tennessee, and Jackson said with a healthy Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker don't play defense. Okay, he don't play defense. They scored on their defense. Tennessee's defense played like garbage that day. Spencer Rattler played like he can play when he came out of high school as a top recruit. He had a good game. That doesn't mean he's played like that all season. Because South Carolina's had some bad performances this season. They struggled against A&M, and remember, A&M's not good. You guys were saying Vanderbilt was better than A&M. So if you look at it all as a whole, South Carolina does not deserve to be over Clemson. It shouldn't even be close. It shouldn't even be a debate.
I completely agree. Is that all the rebuttal?
One more thing.
Mhm.
Where's the respect for Tulane, Austin?
Austin, you got a response for that?
What's that?
He said, where's the respect for Tulane?
Please repeat yourself. I didn't quite catch it all.
I said, where's the respect for Tulane?
I have them at 19. That's as far as I could go with them.
That's not respect.
I mean, yes,
bro.
they have that great. Hey, they beat Cincinnati and they're going to be playing UCF. But here's the thing. When you're in a conference like Tulane is, the American, and you don't play nobody, and your one thing that you're holding on to is Cincinnati, you kind of have to take it all in perspective.
Yeah, but
Because let me ask you this: Do you think the teams I have above them, Florida State, South Carolina, and Clemson, do you think they have better resumes than them?
maybe not, but Tulane made some history. They snapped a long losing streak against AP ranked opponents from 1984, and they won their first ranked versus ranked opponent since 1956. And they ended a long winning streak against Cincinnati. So trumps it all for now.
Well, and in that case, South Carolina trumps everything because they ended Clemson's 40-game home winning streak. If you want to go down that route, Jackson. If we want to go down from that perspective of it.
This is why you're supposed to look at the full body of work and not one game or a head-to-head. And you also, I rank the teams more of what the committee was going to do. Because some of these are just outlandish picks. And I like them. I mean, it's cool. It's great for the viewers. But the picks are going to be by brand. That's why the brand's higher. You got to put the brands higher.
Speaking of the viewers, we have 17, it looks like, or more comments. Does somebody want to bring up the comments onto the screen? Maybe we can touch through some of this.
Well, Troy V said, honestly, be happy you're ranked at all. Stanford and Marshall, tough losses to shake. So,
well, we've beaten Clemson. We've beaten Clemson. We played Ohio State closer than anyone else besides Michigan.
Maryland played great,
like,
too, against Ohio State. Maryland played great, too.
I mean, Maryland, yeah, and Maryland's a good team. But that was at home for Maryland. We played at Ohio State.
In week 1.
Very different.
If Notre Dame played Ohio State right now and Ohio State played a good game, it wouldn't be close.
All right. Well, if that's what you think, Jeffrey. All right.
I'm not saying Notre Dame's bad. I'm just saying you can't base Notre Dame's resume on Clemson. You just can't. They play, and everybody's saying Clemson's trash. So, I mean, if Clemson's trash, then the Notre Dame's win's not good. I mean, I don't base any of that on any of that. Clemson's a good team. Notre Dame got a great win, but they also have 2 bad losses. They have improved as the season's gone along, but they're not a top 15 team.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
All right. And, do we have any more?
Someone said Notre Dame to the Gator Bowl, maybe. And
That's
obviously,
just harsh.
I didn't write these comments. Someone else did, so it came up on
Yeah,
my
it was
view,
me.
hopefully better, because I would have never said none of these things.
Well,
Like
I don't know.
someone said down here that you had where is it at? I think the Gator Bowl is the highest possible destination for Notre Dame, aside from New Year's Six Bowl. That's what it generally is. Again, I didn't write this. Yeah, I think Cheez Bowl is better. So I wrote Hummus Hero Bat when he said, really, the Gator Bowl is always a good ball. It's one of the oldest. And I said, this is me. The Gator Bowl is better than the Cheez
I don't
Bowl.
know. I mean,
It is better.
I
Someone
thought
else
that the
wrote
Cheez-It
that.
Bowl was better because we got put in there in other years. But
You know why the Gator
not
Bowl is
talking
better
out
than the
loud.
Cheez-It Bowl? The day that it's on. That's why it's better.
I think they changed the dates. I think that's why.
Okay.
They probably changed the dates.
Okay.
Let's
On
go through what
to
I remembered from before.
me. My number 20 is, sorry, Will, it's Notre Dame. My number 19 is South Carolina. You guys have looked good recently, so there is recency bias. But you're wishy-washy. You're not consistent. You, as Jeffrey has pointed out for the last 2 weeks, you put up 6 points on Florida, then turn around, put up 63 on an explosive offense, but the offense doesn't play defense. So you guys have like a bottom tier SEC defense or average. And then you got lucky and had just enough points to end Clemson's streak of wins over you. My number 18 is UCLA. You guys have looked good most of the year. The Arizona loss sits heavy because it's lumped in there with the USC loss. Yes, it was by 3, but I believe that was a back-to-back. So I think you lost to USC and then you turned around and lost to Arizona, or you lost to Arizona by a fluke and then turned around and got your heart ripped out by USC. 17 is Tulane. You guys are hot. You guys are on a roll right now. You're looking really good. You're going to play for the American Championship against UCF, who's been looking hot. I think you guys win probably because of Plumlee. At 16, I have Oregon. Ooh, that does not look good. Those 2 losses to your biggest rivals. And it hurts and stings even worse when your loss to your in-state rival was by 4 points. And you let the grip of the game get away. You had a 17-point lead at one point. You had double-digit leads twice in that game and let it get away. Does anyone have any rebuttal?
I have a question about Oregon, if I can ask this. Do you think that Oregon would have played better down the stretch if Kenny Dillingham wasn't thinking about the Arizona State job? Or do you guys think that doesn't really matter with the games? Because I felt like that happened with Mario Cristobal with Oregon last year, too.
I think your first point, I agree with that first point, Will.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, but the thing about when you make speculation on stuff like that is you're never gonna know, because I mean everybody's talking about Lane Kiffin and the 2-point conversion and all that in that game. Was his mind thinking about Auburn? What was he not paying attention? That's why he called the 2 timeouts. Sometimes you just screw up. Sometimes you just lose. I mean, it's a good argument, but it's almost like you're making excuses. Oregon State and Washington are great teams, and you lost the games. So if Kenny Dillingham, if that's why they lost because he was thinking about the Arizona State job, then that's Oregon's problem, and that's Arizona State for getting him. it's Kenny Dillingham for going to Arizona State. That's on the offensive coordinator. That's on the program. You can't blame the fact that they lost on that because that's their fault.
Okay. Anybody have any rebuttal of my 20-16? Nope. Okay. Now we get into the juicy, spicy edge of everything. Now we're talking 15-11. So the committee has decided that 15 is Oregon State, 14 is LSU, 13 is Florida State, 12 is Washington, and 11 is Utah. Will?
Well, of course, I'm not that biased. I am a little bit, but I did put Notre Dame in the top 15 at 15. And then I did put I gotta admit, I would have put South Carolina lower, but I forgot to vote them because I kind of wanted to shake up the Voice of College Football poll, and I'm looking at that. So I put South Carolina 14. I don't think they're like that good. And then I have Clemson just ranked just ahead of them, just because Clemson has a better resume and they don't have as many bad losses. And then I have crap. I messed it up. Sorry. Florida State. I'm gonna put Florida State, and then I'm gonna put Clemson higher later. My bad. Then Florida State, then Kansas State, then Utah, and then Clemson. There we go.
Hold on. Before anybody rebuttals, you completely lost me and probably everybody else in the chat. You got to do the numbers.
Okay. So at 15, I have Notre Dame. And then I have Florida State, Kansas State, Utah, and then Clemson.
So Clemson at 11, Utah at 12, Florida State at 13. And then who's your 14?
14, Kansas State, and then Notre Dame.
All right. Anybody have any rebuttal for Will? Besides pointing out that his bias is bleeding completely through.
Well, yeah, because that's exactly.
Can I still make a point on that?
I was gonna say it. How? I mean, obviously, fan of team. I get you. I mean, it's awesome. When you love your team to rank them higher, but there is nothing about that resume that's top 15. There's nothing about South Carolina's resume that's top 15. You can't put 4 lost teams in the top 15. You just can't do it. I mean, it's impossible. They're just not worthy, man.
Here's my biggest thing, and maybe Austin was going to touch on this. Going into the USC game, Notre Dame was already 15. You're saying they lose by what was it?
USC is a really good team, man. I mean, USC is a playoff team.
I get that, but I'm saying Notre Dame loses by 21 or 31 points, whatever it was.
They were higher than my poll before that. They're higher in my poll before that, and then they dropped down to 15.
Okay. Austin, because I know you were going to say rebuttal.
Will, in all honesty, my man, I get it. You love your Irish as much as I love my Cardinals. But let's face it, man. Your one victory over Clemson, that's enough to keep them there? Please explain. Because Marshall and Stanford is almost like a big, hole in the wall. Let me walk on through this.
Stanford. They have 4 losses.
Well, it matters, but it matters more that they have 4 losses. And when you dissect the resume, it's who are the 4 losses to? Ohio State. Yeah, you kept it close. You play them now, it would take you behind the woodshed. It's Marshall. You were riding a low off of losing to Ohio State. Stanford. Stanford's the one I cannot explain. Can you explain that to me, Will? Stanford is the bottom tier of the Pac-12.
Stanford had the power of the tree. I've said this before. Stanford, once they lost their tree, once
And
their tree got kicked off, then they've been playing much worse. Okay.
Okay,
There is a
so
supernatural power of the tree that crept into South Bend. It made
So-
Tommy Reese a terrible play
What
call.
about the Cal win by 7?
Cal win,
Yeah.
it was that they were really low. They were really low after losing to Marshall and Ohio State. But then they got out of it. They crawled out of it. And they did
A
end up
4-loss
So,
team
Will-
with bad losses should not be 15th.
so you're
So,
saying
Will, just let me ask you this. Real quick, Buckeye Mike. So, Will, you
Go ahead.
think your win over Clemson should overshadow those 4 losses completely?
oh boy, we made him too embarrassed to show his face.
Seriously, I would like to know this. Because if you're saying that you beating Clemson, who we have seen what they are now, and you're going to tell me that's enough to keep Notre Dame there? Like, I would like just an explanation on that, please.
Will, are
I'll
you
give you
there?
an explanation. They don't deserve to be in the top 15 because they have 4 losses and they got 2 bad losses to Stanford and Marshall, and they barely beat Cal.
Oh no, he dropped out. I guess.
Really?
Dude, I'm sorry, man. I'm
I
just
thought
being
this was
honest.
gonna
They're
be a
not a
friendly
top 15. I
spirit.
ranked them 20th. It's not like I didn't have them ranked.
I thought this was just going to be a friendly spirit competition of just comparing rankings. I didn't know that would hurt Will's feelings. I'm sorry,
No.
Will.
Sorry, my connection was bad there.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
You were freaking us all out like we offended you and hurt your
No,
feelings.
that's off.
So, did you hear Austin's question for you?
I heard the beginning.
Go ahead and repeat your question, Austin.
Okay, so, Will, do you believe what you did against Clemson, which we see what they are now, do you believe that's enough to overshadow all your bad losses and your losses in general? To say Notre Dame is a top 15 team that
I mean, no, but I mean, I do use recency bias in my poll, so that really made Notre Dame higher than what they are in other polls.
I was going to say it's either fan bias or recency bias, because I think if it was fan bias, we all know who would be number 1 in your poll no
We
matter
wouldn't
what.
be number 1. We would be behind USC and Ohio State, but we would
Are
be top
you
10.
sure about that?
And Georgia?
No, lower than that. I mean, we would be like 8. I mean, here.
Okay, I was about to say you
Are you
just said
sure?
lower. I was making sure you were saying not just USC and Ohio State. I'm like, you got to put Georgia in there.
No.
All right. Any rebuttals left for Will?
Can't even remember what the other rankings were because it's all been Notre Dame at 15.
good job, Will. You got his ratings.
All right.
South Carolina at 14. That's the only one I remember. He shouldn't have South Carolina at 14 because they got
Well,
4
I forgot
losses.
to put, because this poll was very anti-SEC bias, so I forgot to put them in.
You're good. I mean, they're a good
I also
team.
had Kansas. I had Kansas State in that area as well, and I forgot to add them.
Well, it's his time to shine. Time to hear from the GOAT. What do you got, Jeffrey?
Oregon State is at 15. And I did not put Oregon State over Oregon because of head-to-head. I don't usually do that. That's not why I have them higher. But Oregon State's been really solid. Yes, the Utah loss was ugly. But outside of USC, most people look bad in Rice-Eccles. So, and it was a long time ago. I'm not a recency bias guy either. But it was a long time ago. Oregon State's playing really good right now. They only have 3 losses. So I got them at number 15. Florida State's at number 14. Florida State, the ACC's been really bad, but Florida State has been playing some great football right now. I mean, I know beating Miami's not impressive, but it was their rivals, man. I mean, like that game was just ugly. I mean, Florida State took care of business. They handled Miami. So Florida State's playing really good this season. I mean, maybe they shouldn't be this high. This is probably maybe one of my more controversial ones because of how I rank teams. They maybe shouldn't be this high, but no one else really is shown to deserve being at 14. All the teams below, I just don't see it. So I got them 14th. Utah's at 13. Utah's a frustrating one because at times Utah looks like a top 10 team. And they would be in the top 10 if it wasn't for the Florida loss. So to me, they're a top 10 team, but they have to be 13 because they have 3 losses. And there's just no legitimate way you can have them in the top 10. Kansas State's at number 12. Kansas State at times has looked just fantastic. Like whenever Adrian Martinez is not in and they got that Will Howard guy, they're like a top 9 or 8 team. I mean, they're great. I mean, they're awesome. So maybe they'd be higher than this if it wasn't for Adrian Martinez. I'm not shouting you out, Adrian Martinez. I thought you were a really solid quarterback, but you're not top 15 team material. It's Will Howard or nothing. And at number 11, I got LSU. Yes, the loss at Texas A&M was garbage. And yes, Texas A&M is a bad team, but they're better than Vanderbilt. A&M has proven with the top 10 talent that they can play. They showed up to play with nothing to lose against LSU. LSU is still a really solid team. They faltered a bit lately. The win over Arkansas was garbage too because if KJ Jefferson was healthy, they probably would have lost as well. But they still have the Alabama win. Yeah, they got destroyed by Tennessee, but LSU has enough there to be ranked at 11. I never thought they should have been 5th. They should have never been 5th. But I haven't ranked at 11th because there's just, unfortunately, their resume is better than the other teams behind them.
Anyone have any rebuttals?
I have one question. One more Notre Dame question. If we played on a neutral field against LSU, who do you think would win?
If this was at the beginning of the season, they'd get blown out. But if they played right now, it'd be a 50-50 game.
Okay. I'll take that. I'll take that from the GOAT.
Thanks. I mean, Notre Dame's really solid, man. I hate that you have the 2 losses, just like I hate Utah lost to Florida because, yes, Notre Dame should be higher if they didn't have those 2 losses.
I put LSU too high, man. I can't have LSU above.
You would think Martinez would have figured,
better, but he's still not better than Will Howard.
Feels like he's been playing forever. That's because he would have been graduated by now, but COVID happened, and it didn't affect your eligibility.
Will Howard came out of nowhere.
I have a rebuttal for you, Jeffrey. Utah, why so low, my man? Have you seen their resume? Their resume is pretty good in my book. They beat USC. They beat USC and they beat. Excuse me, pardon me, can't speak. And they beat Washington. How can you not have them in your top 10? I know that loss to Florida is not that good. Doesn't look that good on them. But still, does their resume make up for that? Because that was the first game of the year.
Yes, I mean, I understand your point. You basically heard me. I said Utah is a top 10 team that can't be ranked in the top 10 because of the loss to Florida. Unfortunately, a Pac-12 team with 3 losses cannot be in the top 10. It just even though they're a lot better this year, you just can't do it. They're a solid team. I love Utah. I think they're fantastic, but you got to remember as well, they could have easily lost that USC game. They won by 1 point, and that was a fluky ending where they probably should have lost, as Tony has pointed out a million times. Utah is really solid, but the Florida loss drags them down, and there's just not enough there for me. I mean, maybe if I took a look at it again, maybe it is, but they have 3 losses, and I'm just spoiling you out here, or spoiling my rankings out, not you, but my rankings out for you guys. I don't have a team with more than 2 losses in the top 10, so Utah can't be in the top 10.
Okay, another thing. I know we don't want to go too long, but Jeffrey, I just can't get with that Utah ranking, my man, because depending on where you have USC, wouldn't that be of some value? I get it. They lost to Florida. But Florida is going to be a bowl team. They are 6-6. Florida is going bowling. And Florida is what, the sixth best team in the SEC? So it's not like they lost to Marshall and Stanford. It's not like they lost to Boston College. I just want to throw that out there.
I feel like Florida is also a very inconsistent team. Like they played very well against Florida State. They played very well against South Carolina. And then they have a stinker against Vandy. So I think
And
like
they also have the fact that they only beat Utah by 3. Because realistically, I think if there was now I know that's not how the game works, but if there was like 5 minutes more on the clock, Utah probably wins that game. They also have the close one with USF. That's a team you should have slaughtered. You beat them by 2 points. And then there was the Kentucky loss. That's really heavy on Florida.
I mean Kentucky. I mean, I feel like they're the better team than Florida, so it wasn't that bad. But yeah, they did lose at home.
Well, I just mean Florida's a brand, and Florida's been known to go on stretches to beat Kentucky for so long. Like it's a miracle out of God's miracle when Kentucky beats Florida.
Or when Tennessee beats Florida. But, I mean, I will say, though, again, to Austin's point, I already said when I did my outline when I got to Utah, they're a top 10 team to me. But they can't be ranked in the top 10 when there's no space for them. Everybody in my top 10 has 2 losses or less. They can't be in the top 10. I have them as the 3rd highest team with 3 losses. The only reason why I have LSU higher is because, unfortunately, whether people want to admit it or not, unfortunately, SEC, I don't like saying the SEC is better. I don't, because it frustrates me. I get sick of hearing it myself. But LSU, they have a win over Alabama, and to most people, that is better than anything. So, I mean, and their other teams, the other teams that they've beaten, the resume, it's just there. So I have them 11. Kansas State, they played fantastic when Will Howard's in. I mean, when Will Howard's been playing for Kansas State looks way better than Utah. So I have them 12. Utah's 13th. I want them higher. I wish I could have them higher, but I can't personally have them higher. They have 3 losses, and the Florida loss is bad because Florida stinks. Someday, I mean, obviously sometimes they're good, but they stink sometimes. And I have them 13th. They'd be in my top 10 if they didn't have 3 losses.
We agree to disagree, my friend. That's all I'm going to say. I respect your opinion, and that's all there is to it. I hope you respect mine when we get to it.
I can go ahead with my 15 to 11.
Go ahead.
Okay, my 15 is Oregon. My 14 is Kansas State. My 13 is Tulane. My 12 is LSU, and my 11 is Tennessee. Any rebuttals?
Why?
The Tennessee one, you could argue that they're still a top 10 team even after their loss to South Carolina because they do own victories over Alabama, and they did kind of, spank LSU on their turf.
Yeah.
Like, so you can argue Tennessee is still a top 16, top 10.
My biggest thing is Tulane.
Well, because of what I pointed out earlier about Cincinnati, but another reason, their head-to-head win over Kansas State on ESPN Plus when nobody was talking about it on September 17th, 2022, y'all. And it was a big win that nobody knew about until now.
I did point it out. I did point it out earlier. You heard me say it. I said they do have the Kansas State win.
True.
But Tulane's not a brand. I'm sorry. I hate saying it because it makes me feel filthy. I
It's
don't like
okay.
talking about brands, but you got to rank brands higher than teams that are not brands.
Well,
It's
I
the way
don't
it
do
works.
the whole ranking someone because, they're a brand. I go by, I'm just going by, strength of wins. Nothing personal. I'll even punish my team if I have to. This is a business.
So does anyone have anything else for?
No.
Ranking team for
September
when they won
17th,
this year.
2022.
They
Yeah.
won this.
Two. Yeah, the Tulane Kansas State game happened this year, and it was on ESPN Plus.
It probably just feels like it was a year ago.
Yeah. Well, time has a way of flying by really fast. Will, anything you guys say?
I mean, I thought it was pretty good, man. I mean, I just would have had my Irish higher, but I understand.
Bias. All right, Austin, you're up.
All right. At number 15, I have Oregon State. Number 14, I have UCLA. Number 13, I have Oregon. Number 12, I have Kansas State. And number 11, I have LSU. Anybody have any objections to that before I start explaining?
What were your 15, 14, 13 again?
I want to hear your explanations before there's rebuttal.
Which one would you like to hear? Okay, so Oregon State, that one's pretty. I know a lot of people are giving them flack because of the Utah loss, but you got to think Utah and Rice Eccles. Not a lot of teams could say they've gone in there and survived it. Like USC can't even say that. Oregon, they had to beat them at home. UCLA, I still think they're a top 15 team for the fact that they beat Utah, that they beat Washington. They hung in there with USC until the end. USC needed 48 points in the Rose Bowl to hang on. They needed DTR to turn the ball over twice. And yes, Oregon whipped them. There's no arguments on that one. But I still believe UCLA is a top 15 team. They have these wins. And yes, I know what Jeffrey's going to say. They have 4 losses. You can't have them there. I disagree because if the resume is there, I believe you can put them there based on their resume. And then my 13 is Oregon. Oregon beat Utah. And Oregon did lose to Washington, but it was a close game. And they beat UCLA, who I have one spot behind them. And I think Oregon's a really good team. I think that loss to Georgia, but I won't say it's a fluke, but if it happened again, I don't think it'll be as bad. I think that was just because it was at the beginning of the year, and I think it'd be a competitive game. Number 12, I have Kansas State because they blew the roof off Oklahoma State. They kept it close with TCU, and who knows, they might win that game if their quarterback doesn't go down. And then 11, I have LSU. I'm not saying that their loss to Texas A&M is awful. We all can agree. But they still beat Alabama. And whether people want to admit it or not, Alabama is the team in the SEC.
Not this year. Georgia is, Austin.
That's what I was going to say.
To me personally, I believe Alabama is still the team to beat. That's just my personal opinion.
That's all right. Anybody have any questions or rebuttal for Austin?
Well, I mean, my thing is that like everybody ranks teams differently, so I mean, just me personally, if you have too many losses, then I have a hard time putting you high because you lost a set amount of games. Like I understand your point, Austin. UCLA is a really solid team. But if UCLA had 3 losses and they hadn't have lost to Arizona, then I would have them in my top 15 too. If Utah didn't have the Florida loss and they only had 2 losses, I'd have them in my top 10. It's just how it works. Unfortunately, you lost too many games for me to have you as high as others do. Not to say you can't have UCLA 14. I personally would love to have UCLA 14. I would personally love to have Utah in the top 10, but for me, I just can't.
So let me ask you guys this. Troy V made the comment, did I have Oregon higher than Oregon State? Yes. I know what you're thinking. Oregon State, yes, they did beat Oregon. But some people do not value head-to-head as much. I took that into consideration, yes. But I believe Oregon is still the better team, and they have the better resume than Oregon State. So therefore, I believe that I would put Oregon 2 spots ahead. It's not like that's just my personal opinion, guys.
Oh,
Oregon
James,
State has 3 losses, by the
yeah.
way. Oregon State has 3
USC,
losses,
Utah,
and
Washington.
Oregon does. So they both have 3 losses. They're both really solid teams. And I actually do agree with Austin that I think Oregon is a team. And I almost rank Oregon higher because of the brand thing. The only reason why I have Oregon State higher is because they're playing really good right now. They deserve it.
Is that everything?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, does anyone have any problem with LSU at 11? Because I know that one could be a little controversial.
That's where I got them, so you're good, man.
So I have at number 15, I have Oregon State because I realize they're both 3-loss teams. But when it comes down to it, Oregon may be the overall better team. But Oregon State did beat Oregon to give Oregon the 3rd loss. 14, I have Florida State because Florida State's been looking better. They blew out Miami, took them behind the woodshed. They have the big win over the in-state rival Florida. At 13, I have Kansas State because even though they had a trip up with TCU, they get the rematch. I think it could go the other way this time. But overall, they've looked really good, and a lot of the production on offense, I believe, is because of Deuce Vaughn. At number 12, I have Clemson because you lost to your in-state rival, but you also only lost by 1. That's the thing. Yes, it means a lot and makes you drop a lot because it's an unranked team that you lost to, but it was a 1-point loss. And at number 11, I have LSU because, yeah, they lost by 3 touchdowns to Texas A&M, but they went into that game at like number 5 or number 6. So it makes sense to drop them to 11. I think the committee honestly was a little more harsh than a lot of us because a lot of us had LSU at 11. Committee had LSU at 14.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that 100%. To point out James Scott's point about some people don't value head-to-head that much, then why play the game? I agree with that, but the thing is just because a team beat a team doesn't make them the better team.
The committee doesn't always value head-to-head straight up either. There's
I agree.
There's like 5 or 6 guidelines the committee uses.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it's Selection Sunday, it's championship, the conference championship. Did they win their division but lose the conference championship ahead of this team that didn't even win their division? And it's head-to-head. It's strength of record, which I think is what Jackson said, strength of schedule. There's so many ways that the committee themselves decides the layout of these teams. So as you've noticed, some of us have been on par with the committee in certain areas, and some of us have been north or south of where the committees put these teams. And that's why we're here just discussing all this and seeing if we qualify to be on the committee. This is where we would rank everyone.
But as my last point, as I said, just because you beat a team doesn't make you the better team. Is Vanderbilt better than Florida? No, they're not. But they beat them. So are we going to say that Vanderbilt should be over Florida in our rankings if we were ranking 1 through 130? No. I'd have Vanderbilt way lower than Florida. So just because a team beat a team doesn't mean you rank them higher, and it doesn't always mean they're better. They just beat you on that given Saturday.
Anyone else have any rebuttal or questions for mine?
I
All
mean,
right.
I do kind of agree with what James said. Like, I know Florida State blew out Miami, and I know Miami's a brand, but they are horrible. So I wouldn't really like raise Florida State just because of that.
Really?
I mean,
Notre Dame lost to Stanford. They're both brands. You both looked
Stanford isn't a
horrible.
brand. I mean, they're a good.
Notre Dame is a brand, and you lost to Marshall, and it looked bad.
Stanford might not be a brand, but they've been a brand for over a decade. So they have some validity. But they still stink this year.
Losses to USC, Washington, Utah versus blowout loss to Georgia, and losses to Washington, Oregon State. I don't see why they would be higher. Well, you might just be happy what I have to say about Oregon State here in a little bit.
To be fair, Oregon did beat Utah. I'll give
Whereas
them
USC did not.
that. Yeah.
That given Saturday was this past Saturday. What?
If you're talking about the Pitt Miami thing, I'm not even talking about that, by the way. I'm just talking about in general. I'm not talking about that.
Okay. We are now up to the top 10. So,
Oh, Tim is here. What's up, Tim?
From here, everybody's going to give 10 through 7, and then we're going to break down our top 6 one pick by one pick. So, the committee has decided that at number 10 is Kansas State. At number 9 is Clemson. At number 8 is Penn State. And number 7 is Tennessee. What is everyone's thoughts just on that? And then if there is none, we can just go ahead and let Will name his off. If we want to wait and do rebuttal with Will's, then we can. Like, does anyone have any arguments for the committees and where they are?
What do you guys think about Kansas State being ranked and Utah being ranked ahead of Washington? I mean, I know Washington has the bad loss to Arizona State, right? They're the ones more. No, Washington's lost.
Well, when my rankings come, we'll get to that.
Okay, we'll get to that later. Then.
All right,
so guys
so
are gonna love what I have to say about 10 through 7.
All right.
so you're up, Will.
Mm-hmm. This feels gross, but I do have LSU at 10. I have Tennessee at 9. I have Penn State at 8 and Washington at 7. Wait. Yeah. That might be. Wait, do I want to keep it like that or? Wait, no. I'll have Tennessee. Switch Tennessee and I'll put Tennessee ahead of Wash. There you go. Yeah.
So who's where?
He's flipping them on while we're done. I'm like, what? What?
Okay, I'll go again. 10 LSU, 9 Washington, 8. Wait, crap. I got lost again. Gosh darn it. Wait, I have 10.
I thought you said 8 Penn State.
10 LSU, 9 Washington, 8 Penn State, 9 Tennessee. There you go.
You mean 7 Tennessee?
What?
Wait, crap.
What's 10 through 7? What's 10 through 7, man?
Crap. All right.
No.
Sorry.
Oh,
10
so
Tennessee.
No,
Joe
you just
Milton.
said LSU was
No.
10.
LSU 10, 9 Washington, 8 Tennessee, 9 Penn State. I mean, no, 7 Penn State.
7.
Yeah,
You
sorry.
had Washington
You
at 7.
changed-
You had
you
Washington
changed
at
4
7. Okay, Will said, not Will. Tim said, no, Will, you had it right.
All right,
You had
I know.
Washington at 7. What's the ranking? What's 10 through 7?
Wait. All right. Sorry. I made this poll for the Voice of College Football, and I wanted to change it a bit, but I got lost. Okay. 10.
Can't change it, man. I kept my poll, man. I keep it the same.
I wrote it in marker, so I can't change it.
Okay. 10 LSU, 9 Washington,
You're doing
8
good.
Penn State, 7 Tennessee. There we go.
And that is your final 10 through 7.
Yeah. Sorry, this is late for me. Okay, I usually don't stay up this late.
Anyone have any rebuttal now that we know the final 10 through 7?
So you have 10 LSU, 9 Washington, 8 Penn State, and Tennessee 7.
Yes.
Okay. I'm cool with that.
Mm-hmm. All right, anyone
Mr.
else?
Goat?
Okay. I was just saying what I was whispering. I was just saying I got a pencil, but this eraser's bad, so I can't get rid of it anyway. Doesn't matter. But I kept my poll. I'm keeping it the same. So I'm no changes. I'm keeping it the same. But I will say Clemson's at 10. And I know a lot of people want Clemson lower, but Clemson, they have a loss to a brand, right? Notre Dame, the brand, the team that should be in the top 1, that they should be number 1. So not a bad loss there. So then you lose to South Carolina by 1 point. And DJ Uiagalelei didn't even throw for 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that's a pretty commendable performance. I mean, really. I mean, they lost by 1 with a quarterback that didn't even throw for 100 yards. So Clemson is a top 10 team because they've got a great defense. Their offense, besides DJ when he craps the bed, is great because DJ played like lights out against Wake. So their offense is solid. At times. They played bad against South Carolina, but they still put up 30. Clemson's a brand, and they do deserve to be in the top 10, if only at number 10. Number 9 is Washington. I will say that, yes, the Arizona State loss is poor. It's bad. But Washington has performed in other games really, really well. They've played fantastic. They only have 2 losses, and that's a big key for me. If they had 3 losses, if Utah had 2 losses, Austin, and Washington had 3, I would flip these. I would have Utah at 9, and I would have Washington like at 13 or 14. So that's the only reason why I have Washington in the top 10, because they have 2 losses. Penn State is at number 8. Yes, Penn State hasn't beaten a soul, and they lost to the 2 best teams that they had to play, but Penn State brand, and they've been really solid against every team that besides Ohio State and Michigan. So they're at number 8. And Tennessee's at number 7 because even though Tennessee played really, really bad against South Carolina, they showed how it's done against Vanderbilt. They took care of them, beat them 56-0. So I will say that Tennessee, and they have the win over Alabama, they still blew out LSU. And Tennessee, for the most part of the season, has looked really solid. They had one terrible game that their defense decided not to show up, and they're 7 for me. So those are my rankings. I don't know if anybody likes those or not, but that's what I got.
Anybody have a rebuttal?
I have a question. How much better of a team would Clemson be right now if they didn't have Brandon Streeter as their offensive coordinator? This man is not good at his job. He ran the ball like 3 times with Will Shipley in the second half against South Carolina. It was a low number. It might have not been. It might have been like 5. But it's just crazy like how he just lost that game. I mean, I know their special teams is also terrible, but it's just crazy. Like Clemson's a good team and with good talent, but I feel like no one's gotten less out of more on their offense than Brandon Streeter.
Well, I kind of think Tony Elliott kind of was not that great either. I mean, the thing is that why is DJ Uiagalelei everybody wants to talk about like the inconsistent quarterbacks in college football, but that guy literally threw for 99 yards against South Carolina, but he threw for 450 against Wake. Yes, Wake Forest defense is not that great, but South Carolina's isn't elite either. So how? Is it the OC or is it DJ?
Mhm.
If you ask me, it's DJ. It's DJ Doodoo. I mean, this guy is up and down. He's fabulous against crappy teams. But then he turns back into the crappy stepmom or whoever it is in Cinderella. Like when they play good teams. And it honestly surprised me at the performance against South Carolina. Because South Carolina is the middle of the pack to leaning towards the bottom of the league.
Obviously, there's a bad take here. So is that my take or is that yours, Buck? See, I don't know. I'm not saying Clemson's offense is that good. I'm just saying because Tim's like there's much more wrong than the offense with the offense than DJ. There's much
Right,
more wrong with
but
the offense. Yes, but still, DJ threw for 99 yards against South Carolina. They still put up 30. So
DJ is the quarterback. The offense runs through the quarterback.
the O-line is horrible. The receivers are doo-doo. Okay. See, I don't know what's going on here. Like, why is Clemson taking over the discussion? They're not.
Sorry,
a top
I had
five
one
team.
question, and then it kind of just turned into Clemson.
Okay,
All
so
right.
I have a little bit of a thing with Jeffrey. Jeffrey, would you please explain to me why a team with 3 losses still can't make the top 10 in your opinion, no matter who they've beaten or who they haven't?
It's probably
Because
the
you
fact,
said that's what's keeping Utah down. So
it's probably
please explain to
straight
me.
It's probably straight up the fact that they have 3 losses. And you are not a top 10 team if you have 3 losses. But you have to value the losses. Yes, please explain. Because if you lose to 3 different teams by 1 to 3 points, that's different than losing one game by 1, another game by 10, and being blown out in the other game. So yes, please explain.
Who did you have in your top 10 to 7? Will, did you have a 3-loss team in there?
No.
Okay, there you go.
It was-
There's enough 2-loss teams where there's no 3-loss team that can get in there. It just, I mean, again, I understand Utah. I agree with you, Austin. Utah is great, but they
I
have
might
3
have
losses.
LSU in there.
They have 3 losses, man. It's you had LSU at 10. Okay, you did. Yeah. Well, they have 3 losses. But I'm not saying that I wouldn't ever have a 3-loss team in the top 10. I mean, heck, after bowl season, if we do one final ranking, man, after bowl season, there might be a 3-loss team in the top 10. I'm not saying that I can't do it. But my rankings, I have enough teams that have less than 3 losses to make up a top 10. If there wasn't,
Troy
then I'd
V
have a
brings
3-loss
up
team.
Troy V brings up a great point. He says, I agree with Jeffrey, losses matter. I agree too, losses do matter. But if we look at Utah's 3 losses, they lost to Florida by 3 in the Swamp. They lost to UCLA by 10 in the Rose Bowl. And they lost to Oregon by 3 in Oregon. Now you're telling me that's not a top 10 team?
Okay? Let me look at what the committee has them 11th. So I have them 13th. So if I had them 11th, then would it have been good? I mean, because I don't know.
I'm
Maybe I
sorry
shouldn't
that I'm
have them
beating this horse
13th.
to death. I just think Utah's better than what people are giving them credit for.
I do too.
They
the
deserve
thing that's funny is before
they-
you even said it, before you even said anything to me about it, you didn't even hear my opening monologue. I said it pains me to have Utah here. It pains me to have them at 13. I would love to put them in the top 10, but they have 3 losses. I'm not saying that when you have 3 losses, you can't be in the top 10, but they haven't done enough for me to have them over the teams ahead of them. The 3 losses matter. The Florida loss is fluky. If they had pulled that game out, then yes, I would have them in the top 10. But they lost the game. Florida's not very good. It was in week 1. They're playing better now, but all I know is there were people saying at the beginning of the season that Cam Rising was garbage now. So not everybody's on the Utah train. I got them at 13. They're very good. I wish that they were in my top 10, but if they didn't have that Florida loss, they would be.
I respect your opinion, Jeffrey. I'm just trying to be curious, like, because we act like they didn't beat USC though. Does that win not matter now to anybody? Like, that
If
is
they
a big
beat
win.
USC again, I will have them in my top 10.
That's all I got to say.
I can go ahead.
I guess you're up, Jackson.
I was wondering when we get around that. 10 is Oregon State. 9 is Utah. 8 is Washington. And I love my Crimson Tide, but they got to be number 7 right now.
What? Wow.
This is a business, man. They didn't lose to Penn State. Let's just say I got them a little bit above Bama because they lost to 2 of the best teams in college football, who are 2 of the 2 unbeaten teams last Saturday. Alabama lost to Tennessee and LSU, but Tennessee, has been since then, and LSU crappie flopped all over the floor against Texas A&M last Saturday. You can't be, going down against a 7-loss team and expect me to just reward you. I'm not going to do that. At Washington, oh my gosh, Michael Penix leads the nation in passing yards per game. Utah, that win over USC, man, is awesome. And Oregon State, that comeback in the fourth quarter with 0 passing plays. 0 passing plays. How is anyone not impressed with that? Connor Johnson, if you're watching, you're going to love what I got to say about Oregon State. I'm impressed with them. What can I say? They did enough to impress me to the point where I have them in my top 10.
You do realize I'm defending Alabama here, but you do realize that Alabama's 2 losses are by 3 on the road and by 1 on the road to 2 top roughishly 10 teams. If roughishly is a word, probably not. But
this is my top 10, Jeffrey.
Yeah, Alabama's not 7th. I'll say that because Tennessee got their doors blown off them against South Carolina. That drops them below Alabama.
Yeah.
Even the head-to-head doesn't matter because I don't care about that stuff. And Utah, again, I understand you guys are all justifiably so on putting Utah in the top 10. I want them there, man. But what if they didn't beat USC? They beat them by 1 point, and they really shouldn't have won the game.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember the game, the ending? USC should have won the game. So if they lose that game, where's everybody put Utah?
If they lose that game, they're a 4-loss team.
And they're probably 20th right
Utah
now.
in the top 10.
They're anywhere from.
Since they beat USC, we are talking about Utah in the top 10.
Yes,
Well,
a win is a win, right?
That's like Will trying to justify Notre Dame being higher because they beat Clemson. That doesn't matter. It's 1 game.
LSU struggled versus Arkansas, then followed up by dropping a game to Texas. Exactly. Thank you, James Scott.
That's why they're not in my top 10. I got them 11.
It's not so much that I'm punishing Bama. It's just I'm punishing the teams they lost to. But, yeah, I am punishing Bama a little bit.
Okay.
So not that I want to. I don't want to. But I have to. This is a business. So there you go. Nothing personal against my Crimson Tide.
this is a good point about their wins being tight. Like that is a good point. I could have pointed out Ole Miss, they struggled, A&M, they struggled, backup quarterback, and then the game earlier, I'm screwing my head right now, but yes, Texas, Alabama has struggled for sure, but brand and they won. So that's why they're not in the committee's 7th spot. And that's why they still have a chance to make the playoff. Even though it's just like 10% chance.
I completely agree with Fox Coyote Wolf's point. I mean, I did a video on this exact thing. So go on my channel and check it out. It's probably a little sloppy because it was on the fly, but it's a decent video. Anyway, is that all we have for Mr. Jackson?
That's all you have for Mr. Jackson.
All right, Austin, you're up.
And
Well, Jeffrey, I can already tell you're going to have some arguments with me, but here it goes. Utah at 10, Penn State at 9, Washington at 8, and Tennessee at 7.
That's good. I mean,
Yeah, not that different from mine.
I see Buckeye Mike is a little confused, so let me do some explaining. Utah, they have the victory over USC. Yes, I know the Florida loss, like we've been talking about, is bad, but I still think that their losses to Oregon and UCLA make up for it. Like those aren't bad losses, but I believe Utah is still a top 10 team because they beat USC, who we come to find out later, which we will get to, is where they're at. I believe that holds some weight to it. And then Penn State at 9, that one is simply because yeah, Penn State hasn't played a soul, but they've still played pretty good. Good. I know that's not a very good solid take, but Washington at 8, they beat Oregon in Oztech in Oregon. They lost to UCLA. They lost to Utah, but Washington and they lost to Arizona State, which is a bad loss. I'm not defending it, but they played some really good football as of late. Michael Penix and that defense is coming along, and Washington's playing some good football. And Tennessee at 7, they still have the wins over LSU in LSU, and they still beat Alabama by 3. And like I said before, Alabama, in my opinion, is still the standard of the SEC. And I have LSU at 7. Tennessee at 7, just because of those wins. I know that their loss to South Carolina is awful, but I think the wins over Bama and LSU overshadows them in my book, and that's what keeps Tennessee in the top 7.
Anyone have any questions or rebuttal?
I personally like Austin's picks. That's why I like when he's saying like I'm going to disagree. I don't disagree with him having in the top 10. I just explain why I didn't. Like I definitely see it. They're really solid, man. Utah's good. They're really good. And yes, Tennessee. I have them 7th as well. I mean, if they didn't have that South Carolina loss, they would be like right in the playoff discussion. So they've been solid all year. They have a lot of great wins. So I basically agree with you, Austin. I do.
Yeah, I have Washington at 8. Is that a bad spot for them? Because I'm giving them all the credit. They beat Oregon.
Connor, I figured you'd like that I have Oregon State at number 10 because that fourth quarter comeback impressed me just enough. And, somebody's got to show some respect to Washington, Utah, Oregon State. Might as well be me.
Well, I did. I got Utah and Washington in my top 10 because they've been playing some great football. And Washington, yes, I get why a couple of us kept them out because they lost to Arizona State. That's no excuse. Like, I get it. But you can't overlook their wins. You just can't. Like, beating Oregon.
Your big rival, Oregon, at Oregon on Fox Saturday night is big.
That's why I have Washington at 8. I just feel that they're better than people give them credit for.
Hunter's fired up about the Pac-12.
I mean, that Arizona State loss is why the committee has them at 12 for sure. But I mean, if they didn't have that loss, Washington would probably be in the thick of the playoff discussion like USC is right now. They'd be playing each other, and whoever wins would be in the playoff. More than likely. So I mean, Washington is a really solid team. They had a hiccup, but they're a really solid team, and we all agree with that. And that's why we all have them higher.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Penix, man, has done a magnificent job in 2022. I mean, leading the nation in passing yards. That's terrific, man.
Yeah, and I think Washington. I know you said y'all had them higher than I did, but do y'all believe 8 is too low? Like, let me throw that out there. Is 8 too low or?
No, that's just right. I have Washington at 8.
You can't put Washington any higher. I'd love to, but again, if they didn't have the Arizona State loss, they would be higher.
Now the Tennessee one, I know we all have Tennessee at I have Tennessee at 7. Jeffrey, you have Tennessee at 7. Jackson doesn't, and Will does. So everyone's in agreement. Tennessee is still one of the better teams and still one of the top 7 teams in football.
For who's said theirs, yeah. You guys are all in agreement.
Except for me.
Yeah, except for Jack.
Well, I know everyone takes the South Carolina loss out of proportion. Do we think if that was on a neutral field that they would win that game more than maybe 3 times?
As long
Absolutely
as they don't lose
not.
Hooker, they win.
Absolutely not. South Carolina would not win more than 3 times. I'll tell you why. Spencer Rattler had one of the games of his life. He had 6 touchdowns on 460 yards. He balled out for whatever reason. He balled out.
Yeah, that was the point I was going to make. You can look at it one of 2 ways. Tennessee, their defense played bad, but Spencer Rattler also had the game of his life. I mean, he didn't even play as well against Clemson. Played pretty good, but, I mean, that was just an unbelievable, otherworldly type performance from that guy. I mean, Spencer Rattler is a guy that all season, I mean, he had they were showing it on TV, he had 14 touchdowns and 9 picks or whatever. That's average. And then out of nowhere, he throws for 6 touchdowns and 450 yards against Tennessee. So, again, if that game was replayed, Tennessee more than likely wins with Hendon Hooker healthy and Tennessee's defense playing just slightly better.
Agreed.
I'll say this, though, about Tennessee. I feels like other quarterbacks, such as Anthony Richardson, also just balled out against Tennessee defense. So is their defense but just bad, you think? Or
their defense isn't good. I mean, it's not good at all, but it's not – I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it's not, not that good. I mean, I know James Scott points out Missouri came closer to beating Georgia than Tennessee, but Georgia also played like garbage against Missouri. If Georgia played Missouri again and Georgia gave it 110%, they beat Missouri about 30. That was a bad game. That's why, unfortunately, the way when people perceive games, they take a result and blow it out of proportion. Do people honestly believe that Missouri's better than Tennessee? Tennessee beat Missouri by 4 or 5 touchdowns. It was 60-something to 24. They blew them out. So, again, that's not how it works. Results should not be taken out of context. Georgia beat Missouri by 4, but Georgia played a bad game. They only beat Kent State by 17, but they beat Vanderbilt by 55. So, again, Georgia, it depends on sometimes how Georgia plays versus how the other team play. That's how this stuff works. Sometimes you just play bad.
Yeah, last thing I want to say on this to everybody. I'm not saying Tennessee's defense is I agree, Tennessee's defense is awful. But we can't act like they didn't go into LSU, Baton Rouge, and whoop them. We can't act like they didn't beat Alabama. We can't just ignore that. Like, yes, I agree with Jeffrey. Their loss to South Carolina was awful. Should have never happened. But we can't ignore the 2 great wins that they got. That's all I'd like to say on that.
The other thing here about but Tennessee proved what they cannot do versus Georgia because Georgia's defense. Yes, that's true, but you got to imagine, what if Tennessee was unranked playing Georgia? Would Georgia would have played as hard? We don't know, because they could have had a Missouri type performance against Tennessee. Georgia gave it 110% because Tennessee was ranked number 1 by the committee. And Georgia's like, nope, we're going to prove we're better. And Georgia is a better team. They have way more NFL talent than Tennessee does. They're a better team. But Georgia has bad games like everyone else, and that's why they almost lost to Missouri. That doesn't mean Missouri's that good. Missouri got lucky. They played a really good game, and Georgia played terrible. That doesn't mean that Missouri's better than Tennessee. That's why head-to-head doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, Tim brings up a point real fast. If Hendon Hooker was playing the rest of the year, if with Hendon Hooker he's not playing the rest of the year, rankings should reflect on that. Okay, so you're telling me just because the quarterback goes down, the rest of the team ain't there either? I mean, look at Alabama. When Bryce Young went down, they were still Alabama. They still had all these players. I get what you're saying. Hendon Hooker is a big piece of that Tennessee team. But it's not like they don't have other players and 5 stars on that team.
I'm sure that Tennessee would have been ranked lower by us and the committee if they beat Vanderbilt by 3. But you got to remember that they just went and just blew the complete doors off of Vanderbilt. And keep in mind that a week ago, some people in this discussion room right here said that Vanderbilt was better than Texas A&M. No. Texas A&M and
on a
Vanderbilt.
neutral field,
Texas
it may
A&M and
be. We don't
Vanderbilt.
know.
Texas A&M and Vanderbilt could play 10 times, and Vanderbilt could beat Texas A&M. That doesn't mean Vanderbilt's better than Texas A&M. Tennessee's not always 56 points better than Vanderbilt, but they blew them out. That's why the rankings are keeping them higher, because they did what they had to do without Hooker. They played well, and their defense played well for once.
Will, it's okay. It's all right.
Hey.
Realistically, A&M, the trick is it's this year's A&M team. Because realistically, any other year, A&M will take Vandy to a neutral site and just rip them in half down the spine. Anyway, is that all for Austin?
Well, I think I've got the chat mad at me, partly in some because you got Connor Johnson saying great takes, Jeffrey, but then Troy's like, I can't believe we're using Vandy as a measuring stick. So yeah, we can look at it both ways. I'm not saying Vanderbilt should be a measuring stick. I'm just using it as an example of how different teams play against different teams. Head-to-head doesn't always matter, because just because a team beat a team at that time doesn't mean they're always going to beat that team, and doesn't mean that that team's necessarily better than that team just because they beat that team that one time. That's why you would say this team would beat this team 7 or 8 out of 10 times, because in our minds, they're better than that team, even though they lost to that team.
Yes, never get mad at Jeffrey. Never. Ever.
Well, you were right, Buckeye Mike. We brought the spice on that one. Everyone's mad at our Tennessee at 7.
Well, here's the thing. My number 10 is Utah. My number 9 is Washington. My number 8 is Penn State. My number 7 is Tennessee. My number 8 is Penn State because they did what they're supposed to do all year. You're supposed to lose to Michigan. You're supposed to lose to Ohio State. And you're supposed to take every other team behind the woodshed and freaking take the axe to them, or something else to be cleaner per se. But they did exactly what they're supposed to do. You're still the number 3 team in the Big Ten. Because I don't like this division thing, because Purdue is in the middle of the pack to the bottom of the the
To
conference.
be fair, Purdue I know it was at home, but Purdue should have probably beat Penn State if Jeff Brom made better coaching decisions in that game.
If that's the case, then I was going to say, if that's the case, then maybe Utah should be in the top 4 because Utah played a close game to Florida. We have to value each one the same way. You can't be fair to Penn State and not be fair to Utah. I mean, if that's the case, then Ohio State should be number 2 still, even though they were just blown out by 3 touchdowns to Michigan.
By
We
the
have
way,
to look at everything.
You're good on the axe thing because you got to remember, man, Johnny Appleseed used an axe. Nicest guy ever.
Yes. The division thing has to go. It will go soon.
Purdue is the only unranked team playing in a Power 5 championship. Shameful. Not on our rankings, they're not.
Exactly my point. Exactly my point. As far as Washington and Utah, whether you disagree with it or agree with it, whether you agree with it or disagree with it.
Borden. I need to look this up. Who's Lizzie Borden?
Oh my God. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, Washington has a great win over Oregon. Washington just blew the doors off of Washington State by almost 20 points. So if you can't give credit to Washington for that performance, then you can't give credit to Michigan because they beat Ohio State by almost the exact same amount of points. And then Tennessee. I'm not going to waste any more time on Tennessee because everyone has justified my reasoning for Tennessee at 7.
I think I made Tim mad, but I'm sorry.
We love you, Tim.
We love you.
All right. Now, the point that everyone's been waiting for, top 6. The committee has said Alabama at number 6 and Ohio State at number 5. Will, your 5 and 6, please, sir.
Honestly, okay, I did put Ohio State at 5 and Alabama at 6, but I have to use the real MVP's argument here just to make it entertaining.
Is it sane?
DeReal is not here, please. Come on. I love DeReal, man, but no.
Okay, Alabama lost on the last play of the game in both of their losses. Ohio State got demolished in the second half against Michigan. So is Ohio State should still be ranked higher because they got blown out, and Bama's lost one of the last play.
If that's the case, then the committee should listen to Mike Fort over there on one of the visitors for Voice of College Football because he's told me on Sunday when I called in that he would have Ohio State at 4. And then we're discrediting TCU? That Ohio State at 5 makes perfect sense.
Here's my thing that before we get to my rankings, which you're already going to know how I rank the teams based on what I just say. But here's the thing. Again, you look at the loss factor here, okay? You have Alabama with 2 losses. This kind of plays into my point, though, about how Austin says Utah should be in the top 10. But I'm talking about the loss factor. Alabama has 2 losses. Ohio State has 1. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's one of those things where if Alabama had 1 loss and Ohio State had one loss, then it'd be obvious who should be ahead. It would be Alabama. Alabama would be ahead of Ohio State if they both had 1 loss. But since Alabama has 2 losses and Ohio State has 1 loss, that's why. That's why Ohio State's ahead.
In other words, you have Ohio State at 5, Bama at 6, and it doesn't matter that Ohio State was blown out by 3 touchdowns. It's the fact of Ohio State has 1 loss, Bama has 2, which not to ruin everybody else's 5 and 6, because I think we're all on the same page with this, but the committee even said Ohio State 5, Bama 6. So that's probably what they're looking at. The fact of Ohio State has 1 loss, Bama has 2. Bama has more losses than Ohio State. Therefore, Ohio State is 5, Bama is 6, and Ohio State has a better chance if 3 or 4 would lose to get in.
We talked about this before as well, Buck. We said you had, for instance, the year that Alabama had 1 loss and they were outside of the conference championship game. They couldn't play in it. And then Ohio State had 2 losses, but they were a conference champion. Alabama got in over Ohio State because they had 1 loss and Ohio State had 2 losses. I used the same logic here. Ohio State has 1 loss. Yes, it was terrible. Yes, it was by 3 touchdowns, but it was to the number 2 team in the country. Alabama has 2 losses, and as someone pointed out earlier, they had a lot of close wins as well. Alabama, yes, SEC, it's the standard, as people always say in college football, but they have no conference championship to play for. The only way Alabama gets in the playoff is if utter chaos is ensued on Saturday or Friday night with the Pac-12 championship game, and it's slim. But Alabama cannot be over Ohio State, because Ohio State has 1 loss, albeit it was a bad one, to a really good team. But they have 1 loss. Alabama has 2 losses. It wouldn't be right.
So I can put you down for Ohio State 5, okay. Alabama 6.
I guess that was my rebuttal, I guess, to the narrative of Ohio State. But yes, I have Alabama at number 6, and I got Ohio State at number 5. For all the reasons I've already said, because, again, it wouldn't be right to have a 2-loss Alabama over a 1-loss Ohio State. It just wouldn't be right.
I agree. I just wanted to do it for the content. I just wanted to make that argument for the content.
I'm just curious for Jackson's, because he's the only one going to be different.
Yeah. Well, 5 is Ohio State, and 6 is Penn State. I mean, Penn State did one thing Michigan, Ohio State couldn't do. Well, didn't play, clearly. They beat the Big Ten West Division champ on the road on September 1st, 2022. But also, look.
So here's the thing. You can only make that argument because Purdue won the division.
Yeah.
What? Oh, my God.
You got to imagine.
At least Jeffrey on Alabama.
You
can make an argument for Bama.
Jackson, all right. You're talking about, I'll say this really quick because I talked long the last time. You got to imagine Penn State got destroyed against Michigan.
True.
And they lost by a very even though it was a close game, they lost by fairly respectable, but it was starting to get out of hand game against Ohio State. That goes into the close loss. So we can compare Alabama Alabama and Penn State because they both have 2 losses. I'm not comparing Ohio State and Alabama because if Ohio State had 2 losses, I'd have Alabama ahead of them. But Ohio State has 1 loss. Penn State has 2 losses, and they were worse losses than Alabama's.
Yeah.
That's why I have them lower. And I have them at 8th because I think Tennessee's better than Penn State, too.
Why I have Bama lower is it's not even like much to do with Bama, but it's how like Tennessee has played since after they played Bama, since LSU has played since after they played Bama. And heck, even Ole Miss, Ole Miss went on that little losing streak after they played Bama. So that's why I got Bama below Penn State. But Michigan, Ohio State, last Saturday, were both unbeaten. So there you go. That's just my 5 and 6 now.
Austin?
Okay, so I'm going to make some people even more mad. I have Ohio State at 6, Bama at 5.
What? Explain yourself.
Not hear my argument.
Okay, hold on. Give me a chance to explain. I truly believe this, and it's good for content. But Here's why I have Ohio State at 6. You got destroyed in your house to Michigan, 45-23. As Alabama, it took a 2-point conversion in overtime at night at LSU to have them beaten. It took a field goal at the end in Tennessee to beat Bama. You're telling me 2 close road losses? I think those are better than getting beat by 20 plus by your rival at home, at the shoe, at Ohio State. And Bama, they have the
Look at
best.
this man's face, Austin. Look at what you made him do.
And Ohio State, I'm sorry, you haven't beaten nobody in my book.
What?
Except Notre Dame.
Oh my Lord.
Notre Dame
So
is your only quality win in my book. And Penn
Hold
State,
on.
excuse me, my book.
Thank you.
Penn State
Okay.
and Notre Dame.
I was going to
Other
say,
than
you
that-
can't.
They beat Indiana.
Indiana sucks.
Oh, I know, man. I'm just kidding. It's good for content, man. We got to use that good for content line, man.
Yeah, what's Bama's best win? Austin.
I'm not even gonna-
Texas.
Hey, Buckeye Mike, you would not want
Texas
Austin
and Ole Miss.
you would not want Austin as a committee member, Buckeye Mike.
I was
Texas
gonna
and
say-
Ole Miss would probably be their 2 best wins.
I was going to say, if you can't credit Ohio State for beating Penn State, you can't credit Michigan for beating Penn State.
No. I misconstrued my words. I gave you credit. Notre Dame and Penn State are your 2 best wins. But let me ask you this. Northwestern, you
Okay.
beat them 21-7. You
Weather,
should have beaten them by more there, Buckeye Mike.
weather, right? It was the
Just
weather.
saying.
Weather was a factor. I want to point that out as key in uppercase letters. It's not why it was close.
Now, Buckeye Mike, I have to ask you this question.
Uh-huh.
Do you think all games should be played in a dome then, if weather's such a big factor?
No. The only reason you should play every game in a dome is so every city gets a chance to host the national championship. Why do you think they won't have it here in Columbus?
You do realize the only reason why back in the olden days that this didn't matter is because everybody ran the football. So the weather
Yes.
didn't matter. But see, Ohio State is a passing team. It's harder to throw in the wind.
I would like
It's
to
harder to
point.
throw in the snow than it is to ground and pound.
Mhm.
I would like to point out the chat is saying Ole Miss is unranked. Yes,
And
I
by
get
the
it.
way,
But you
my
all asked
point
me what
about
their
that-
best wins
sorry,
are.
Austin, my point about Ole Miss, and I'll stop talking. Ole Miss deserves to be ranked, but they're not ranked because they just lost. Mississippi State had time to move back up. Ole Miss should be ranked, but it's because they just lost. That's all I got to say. Go ahead, Austin.
I know you all said Ole Miss is unranked and stuff in the chat. I understand that. I get it. I take that in consideration. But you all asked me, what are Bama's best wins? I said Texas and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is still a good win. Do we agree or no?
For
Very good.
Alabama?
Not a good enough
Yes.
win to be number 6.
Mississippi State wins more impressive because they won by more.
Arkansas win for Bama is more impressive, in my opinion. It's probably one of the most impressive wins on the entire year because they won by almost 30 points. Most of that was played with the backup, wasn't it? Or at least the second half was.
Let's see. Gerald says.
Okay, so I'd like to point out, yes, Texas did outplay them, but you asked me what their best win was. So I answered you. Texas is their best win on their schedule.
Okay.
They beat Mississippi State too, as James Scott points out. You know, it was at home, but they did beat Mississippi State.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. My bad. Mississippi State's another good win. But I have Bama 5, Ohio State at 6. I know, Buckeye Mike, you're probably going to have the Buckeyes at 5. So I would like you to explain that to me if that is where you're going with it. Because I don't see
Yes.
it.
What about
Ohio State
Vanderbilt?
at 5. Ohio State at 5. Bama at 6. Why? Because if we play Michigan 10 times, we probably win half, if not 6-4 in our favor.
Are you sure about that? That was a pretty convincing win for the Blue.
Well, let me put it this way. It would be that way if Ryan Day knew how to make freaking adjustments.
He doesn't. And you
That's
have
what I'm
to take that
saying.
into consideration.
It's 1 loss to 2. I'm sure that's what the committee said. It's 1 loss to 2.
Here's my only thing I'd like to say is Ohio State got their butts kicked on their home turf. Alabama did not. Does that not take any consideration?
It takes into consideration, but there are other things that favor Ohio State other than just, we let Michigan come in and we bent over for them and they spanked us. I mean, you can't look at just one score. It's recency bias. If you weigh the resumes, it favors Ohio State. Ohio State's strength of schedule is better than Bama's. Strength of record is better than Bama's. There's like one thing I think that favors Bama, and I forget what it is, but there is like one thing.
I would like to say 2 things. Number one, yes, we're one of the only shows on YouTube that talk about Vanderbilt. So that's point 1 for us. Number 2, I will say, again, if Ohio State and Alabama had the same number of losses, there would be no debate who would be ranked ahead. It would be Alabama, whether they both had 1 loss or whether they both have 2 losses. The only reason Ohio State is ahead is because they have 1 loss. Alabama has 2. The end. If they both had the same amount of losses, then Alabama would be higher.
Am I crazy for putting Bama ahead?
No, it's just whatever system you use, that's what made you put Bama ahead of Ohio State. And there's nothing wrong with it because it creates content, for 1. For 2, I haven't written down everybody's, but I know for a fact I'm pretty close to what the committee said tonight.
Same here.
I'm the exception. Well, one of the exceptions.
This is an interesting comment. Buckeye Mike, not really. Bama's strength of schedule is better. They just lost the games that make it stronger. That is a good point. He makes a good point there, Buckeye Mike.
He does. I'm spitting things out to you on the fly. I only have my
so I want to ask you this.
My rankings written down.
So let's just say, for instance, they beat LSU. Or they beat Tennessee. Who would you say has a better resume?
I just said that. You didn't listen to me, Austin. I said if both of the teams had 1 loss and both of the teams had 2 losses, then Alabama would be higher. But it's because Ohio State has fewer losses than Alabama. That's the only reason why they're ahead. If they both had the same, if Alabama had 1 loss, they'd be in the top 4. They wouldn't even be 5th. They'd be in the top 4. But they have 2 losses. And it's like also James Scott pointed out earlier, they have a 1-point win versus Texas that had an uncalled safety the refs didn't call. That was a safety. What if they lose that game? I mean, you can go both ways with this. You could say, well, what if they beat LSU, but what if they lost to Texas? What if they lost to A&M? What if they lost to Ole Miss?
So here's the thing. So we're going to play like the referees did it. We're going to go down that road because there's been some games that Ohio State has had some help in. Let's be honest.
the Bama fans do it all the time, so why shouldn't we? Yeah, we shouldn't stoop to their level, but if we're going to be honest, outside of probably Jackson, Bama fans always say, oh, no, we don't get all the calls. Yeah, you do. Outside of this year, you get pretty much all the calls. And you blame the refs when you lose. I mean, it's crazy to me that it's like, let's take Alabama and put them on this pedestal and raise them above everybody else, because every year it doesn't matter if Bama that goes 7-5.
Ooh.
They're better than everybody else. Ohio
Man,
State.
you almost had a slip up there, man.
What?
You could say the same thing for Ohio State, man.
I know, but what I'm saying is,
Ohio State's above Alabama, the end.
Yes.
Committee ranked Ohio State above Alabama. They have fewer losses. I mean, I agree with your point, Austin, but Alabama has 2 losses. If they both had 1 loss, then Alabama would be ranked above Ohio State, but they have 2 losses. I mean, Fox Coyote Wolf says 1-loss Alabama might be ahead of undefeated TCU, honestly. Again.
Yes, because of strength of record and schedule.
Top 4, but they have 2 losses. It doesn't matter how tight this is. Ohio State, yes, they made it close. They made it close by losing the way they did. They made it close to dropping below Alabama, but they're still above Alabama because they have fewer losses. If that's the case, losses, Alabama would be higher.
I mean, here's the thing, Austin. If what you're saying is true, then okay, why don't we? And this is just an example, Tim. It's nothing against you or the school. If that's the case, USC has 1 loss. Yes, it's different to OSU's loss because it was 1 point, but they still have 1 loss. So with your logic, Austin, then we're going to take Alabama at 6 and really put them at 4, because committee put USC at 4, and we'll drop USC from 4 and put them at 6. I mean, that's why USC's ahead of Ohio State, because USC has 1 loss too, but it's a 1-point loss.
Mm-hmm. That's also why I was saying if Alabama had 1 loss, they'd be in the top 4 for sure. I mean, and as Troy V points out, a 1-loss Bama team will be playing Saturday as well. Yes, and if they win, they're in the playoff. I mean, it's one of those things where, unfortunately for Alabama, they have 2 losses. Ohio State has 1, and it wasn't enough for the committee to put Alabama over Ohio State. It just wasn't enough.
Yeah, I'm just going to end with this. I believe if you put Bama and Ohio State on a neutral field, I believe Bama is the better team, but I believe that they win 5 out of the 10, 6 out of the 10, but I just personally, in my opinion, that I believe Bama's 5 and Ohio State's 6. That loss to Michigan in their house by as many points as they did, that holds a lot of weight with me. And it's your rival. You can't get blown out like that. Come on.
I think Joey Foster says, I think a lot of people could owe TCU an apology if they win at all. In fact, they are owed an apology if they win game 1.
Well, see, I have a thought about TCU, and this is no knock on Michigan, because obviously people will be saying, oh, Michigan blew out Ohio State. How could you say that they could lose to TCU? But TCU would be in benefit of being 3, because if they play Michigan, TCU would have a better chance to beat Michigan than Georgia. So TCU could win game 1. If Michigan plays bad, obviously if Georgia played bad too, but the physicality, Michigan's physical, but I think TCU would have a better chance of beating Michigan than Georgia. So yes, it would be awesome if they could pull it off. I'm sure Buckeye Mike would be happy, but I'm not just saying that for his benefit. I'd love to see TCU win it all. It'd be great, but they don't have the players. They're going to have to play Michigan and more likely Georgia if they win out. TCU, they're going to have to hope that they both play terrible and TCU plays the games of their life, because they just don't have the team. I would love for them to win it all, though.
All right.
I guess we're set with the top 4 then.
Drum roll, please. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to give you the number 4 team. Everybody's going to go through and give their number 4 team. And we're doing it the same way. We're just doing it 1 team at a time. So at number 4, the committee has USC, which makes sense. Like I said when I was talking to Austin, the resume is better than Ohio State, which is why they put USC at 4. Yes, again, a 1-point loss to Utah. That's it. They're getting a rematch. So that too would only be the reason I could see the committee putting USC at 5, Ohio State at 4, because USC is getting the chance at the rematch. But that's it. Will, your number 4 team.
The Southern California Trojans.
Go.
Yes, I got Tony and Tim and Rick's team, the USC Trojans. I mean, yes, there'd probably be some, why are they not 3? Well, TCU is undefeated and they deserve to be 3. So USC is number 4. Yes, they only have a 1-point loss at Rice-Eccles. So USC is really, really good. They have proven to be really, really good, but they have to be at 4 right now because the 3 teams that are ahead of them are undefeated. So USC has to be at number 4.
Jackson.
USC at 4.
Austin.
TCU.
Oh my God. I thought I was going to be the only one.
Austin's being difficult on purpose here. He's like picking all of the controversial picks. This happened again. No. Okay, let's pull him again. There we go.
TCU at 4. What? Oh my God. Oh Lord.
They're
I truly believe TCU is number 4. I truly believe that, guys.
Because, in my opinion, it's their schedule. It's the conference that they're in. We've seen this before. We've seen this already. Yes, TCU deserves credit for going undefeated so far. They have 1 game left to prove it. It's a rematch. It's 9 times out of 10, you can't.
Joey Foster said, I can bring you a dozen college and a dozen pro football players in here, and they would all tell you stars don't matter. So how can you say TCU don't have the players? I'm not saying they don't have good players. I'm saying that if you stack TCU's players against even Florida's, Florida has better players than TCU. You know that, Joey. You know it deep down in your Big 12 heart with the West Virginia Mountaineers. I'm just saying TCU has great players, but they do not have as good of players as a lot of other teams. That's why everybody's not treating them as such, because they're not a top 4 team. They've just won all their games. They have squeaked by so many games this year. They're a good team. I have them higher than USC for that reason, because they've gone undefeated. But USC's better than TCU. Tennessee's better than TCU. Florida's better than TCU.
All right, I'm going to make this argument for you, Jeffrey, about why I think TCU is better than Florida. I don't think Florida's coaches have done a great job getting the most out of their talent. I think TCU's coaches have gotten all that they can out of their talent, and I think TCU would beat Florida 9 times out of 10 because they've gotten more out of the talent. And I know the talent gap is big between Florida and TCU, but I think
that's the only argument that I'm saying. I understand y'all's point. TCU would kick Florida's butt. Yeah, Florida's played bad this year. I get that, but I'm talking. It's the Vanderbilt A&M
James
thing.
Scott makes
It's the A&M Vanderbilt
comment.
thing again. A&M has better talent than Vanderbilt. Florida has better talent than TCU. Doesn't mean TCU's not a better team than Florida this year.
James Scott, he made a comment saying that I put TCU at 4 because I want Bama in. No, keep Bama as far away as you can. I don't want Bama anywhere near you. I'm just going off my eye test. I hope TCU wins. I'm putting that out there right now. I hope USC, TCU, Michigan, Georgia all win out. Then we can see who the best conference truly is. I'm saying it right now. Go Horned Frogs. Beat those Wildcats. Keep Bama away. Away. Sorry, Jeffrey.
Joey says West Virginia has better players TCU, as does Texas, Oklahoma, and others in the Big 12, but they beat them all. I agree. They rode the struggle bus, but they won. That matters.
Yes,
I mean,
give them their due. I'm just saying we have seen this before with even the top tier teams. Oklahoma's done this before and made the playoff. What'd they do? Other than keeping it close with Georgia when Baker was there, you God. Oklahoma can't hang when it comes to the big guys. Therefore, if TCU is a little brother to Oklahoma and Oklahoma can't hang, how do we think TCU would be able to hang? And the other thing is, I put TCU at 4 because TCU, in my opinion, is the one team likely to lose this week for certain.
Troy,
If TCU goes down, Ohio State's hanging out that 5 spot. If TCU would have been at 4, Ohio State at 5, TCU goes down, whoop, we're going to the playoff. Now, I'm not hoping that. I hope we have some good playoffs this year and TCU gets in. But this is some ranking. We've all, especially heavily on Will, shown our bias towards our team. So this is where my bias comes.
oh, we most certainly are burning the midnight oil.
Yeah, we're burning it up,
Hey,
man.
I agree with you, Buckeye Mike.
Da, 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 da,
I
da.
hope TCU wins. They've been a great story. I'm rooting for them. But I'm not saying that they're undefeated doesn't matter. I just think that we'll get to it in a minute, and I'll explain.
I have a question. Why
4.
every time that I say somebody has better talent than another team, then I get all these responses by people saying that, oh, TCU would kick Florida's butt. Like, I get that. But if you look at recruiting rankings, and I know Billy Napier hasn't gotten a lot of us. I understand he's not done a great job this year. But Florida has better players than TCU does. Florida's going to have more players drafted in the NFL than TCU does.
Well,
That's my argument. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that TCU's not better than Florida. They're better this year. They've won their games. The coaching's been fantastic. The players have played fantastic. But Florida's better players. That's all I'm saying. A&M is better players than Vanderbilt. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that either team's better. I'm just saying you got to look at it from a point of view of that. You look at TCU's players. They don't have it. That's why Buckeye Mike is saying over here that they're going to get destroyed against Georgia. They're going to get destroyed against Michigan more than likely because they don't have the players. They don't have as good of players. They played great this season, but they could have 5 or 6 losses if they had have just lost the one-score games that they won. They've been fantastic. They've been fantastic. God bless TCU. I love TCU. I hope they make the play. I hope they win the darn thing. But they're not as good as these other teams. From a talent perspective, not a coaching, not by results, but from a talent perspective.
A lot of the times you don't make the distinction, though. You just say better. You don't say better talent. That's why
I don't make the distinction because I'm trying to rush because I can ramble for days. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to cut it so you guys can talk. I cut it short, but that's what I mean, guys. That's what I mean.
Yeah, and like I said, we have seen this before. All credit to TCU. If they win on Saturday and get in, all credit to TCU. It's well-deserved. But I want to sit down and watch some playoff games like people have said this year. I want to sit down and watch some playoff games that's not blowouts in the first round. I don't know about anybody else. I'm sick of blowouts in the first round, and it's because the talent level gap is so big. You know, if TCU loses, Ohio State gets in, that talent gap might still be big, but it's smaller compared to Georgia, TCU. Ohio State and Georgia is smaller.
The talent gap would be the closest if you had Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, and Georgia in the playoff. That would be the best talent in the playoff, but that's what nobody wants unless you're fans of those teams.
Why do you think Georgia straight up blew out Michigan, and the only way Michigan made it close, heavy on the quotes, close, because they gave up a garbage time touchdown? The talent gap was so big that Like, here's the talent gap last year between Ohio State, Michigan. Here's the talent gap last year between Georgia and Michigan. It's too big.
Well, look at Alabama and Cincinnati, though. Cincinnati had their best team of all time. They had 9 drafted players, but they still weren't nowhere close to Alabama. Alabama's third stringers were better than Cincinnati's second stringers.
See,
That's
that's
the thing.
where
The depth of Alabama wore Cincinnati down. The Cincinnati starters were pretty good, but behind that, nothing. Alabama has talent on top of talent on top of talent. Because my dad will be like, look, there's guys struggling. They can bring in this true freshman 5-star receiver that hasn't played, or they can bring in this backup quarterback like Tua and win the title. That's the thing about Alabama. They have talent on top of talent that they've built up over years of time. And yes, rankings don't always matter. This is a great point back here where sometimes the 5 stars are more concerned about their individual stats, whereas 3 stars are more team oriented. Yes, that's true. You can win with 3 stars. TCU is proving that. But if this was true, if this comment was true, then Indiana would beat Ohio State more often than since 1987. Stars matter.
stars matter. He's right to a point, or her, who, if it's a male or female, they are right, because look at CJ Stroud. What in the crap? He's melted. He has melted his brain out and his face off. I can't fathom and understand. CJ Stroud is supposed to be a 5-star quarterback, and look at how poorly he has played overall. He should have played so much better in the 2 years that he's played. So, to your point with the talent, they're thinking more about the next step and not always giving it their all.
Right, when TCU faces a team and is coached as well, if not better than their own, and has significantly better talent, they will lose going away, for sure. And Joey Foster's point of West Virginia more drafted than LSU, including 2 first-round and second-round pick in the 2012 draft, Geno Smith, Taven Austin, Stephen Bailey, 2 3-star, 1 4-star. Stars don't matter. Those are isolated instances, man. Joey, you are right. That's awesome that West Virginia has had that one season. But is West Virginia consistently in the playoff discussion? No. Why? Because their coaching's not very good and they don't have good players on the stars stats level. You can have players that are not ranked highly that are great. It happens. But if you have a team full of 5 stars, 99 out of 100, that team's going to beat a team full of 3 stars. It happens every single week in college football. That's why people loathe Alabama, because they have good coaching and great players and they win all the time. If Alabama had 3-star talented players, Nick Saban cannot win a national championship at Alabama. He has the top or second or third best recruiting class every single season, and you have good coaching. That's why Bama wins. You cannot win a championship with 3 stars.
Okay.
Almost ever.
Okay.
I must say this.
Let me grab my fishing pole. Cast it out and reel us back in, guys. We're almost done.
Okay, I'll talk after. I'll say this afterwards. Just okay. It would get us on a tangent.
All right. Number 3. The committee has TCU at number 3. My opinion, the number 3 ranking is well deserved. But as I said with number 4, you know my thoughts. Will, you're number 3.
TCU.
Go.
TCU, and off of James Scott's point, coaching matters. Utah's been competing at the level after several years with 3-star development's key. But they're not winning championships. Kyle Whittingham is an elite coach, but they're not winning championships. And yes, Troy V is an animal with 4 stars. Coaching does matter. Yes, I said that. Alabama has great coaching and 5 stars. There's a difference. Everybody's taking my words out of context. You can win with 3 stars. Most of the time can't win a championship. Coaching matters, but you have to have coaching and talent to win. It's just the way it is. TCU's a great team. They've been a great story, but it's going to take a lot of luck for them to beat Michigan and Georgia or whoever they play if they make the playoff with the players they have. They've had a great season, but you have to have coaching and 5 stars to win.
Jackson?
TCU at 3.
Austin?
USC.
Yep, USC as well.
Oh man.
Jesus. Okay. Number 2, the committee said Michigan. Now, I've heard arguments that Michigan should be number 1 over Georgia. No.
Anybody gonna go spicy?
Do we all agree at Michigan at 2?
Yes.
I have Michigan at 1.
Whoa! Okay, Will, the floor is yours.
The
Why
reason I have Michigan-
Why Georgia at 2? We're talking about number 2, so why Georgia at 2?
at 2 is because they've been very inconsistent in their performances. You look at the Kent State performance. You look at the Missouri performance. They were not playing well in the game. Georgia Tech, they slept through the first half against Georgia Tech. I just think that Michigan's been the more consistent team week after week. And I think, even though I don't like Michigan, I think Michigan, they've been the more consistent team each week. You know what Michigan you're going to get. You know they're going to win by a bunch of points. I know their competition isn't as good, but Georgia has played against some Big Ten West competition and not played well, and Michigan has consistently played well every week. That's why I think Michigan should be number 1.
I have
So-
Michigan at 2.
So, Will,
Mm-hmm.
Georgia plays in the SEC, correct?
Mm-hmm.
As a whole, the SEC is the better conference than the Big Ten, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Georgia has been
Yeah.
number 1. Georgia has not lost.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore-
Neither is Michigan, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Therefore,
I just think
you
that
can't-
Michigan has played better every week. Georgia hasn't played as well every week. If you look at the resume, you look at like how much Michigan's won by in most of their games. It's been more, but also you look at the ones where Georgia's played bad. They've played bad against their worst teams, and Michigan has played consistently well has played like better against the bad teams than Georgia has.
I know.
And the
I
one team
never.
that Michigan did play, they crushed, and Georgia's crushed all of their best opponents too.
I never thought I would say this, but because I've always thought that Michigan's non-conference hurt them, but Connecticut is bowl eligible.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what Colorado State is, and the other one was Hawaii, and I forget what they are. But Michigan, to your point, Michigan never played down to their competition
Mm-hmm.
per se. They did what they were supposed to.
And,
Yes.
and when they played, and then when they played top competition like Penn State and Ohio State, they took it to them.
Oh, Hawaii's 3-10 and Colorado State's 3-9.
See, that's been my whole point with Michigan is
3 and
the
2.
only thing that helps us is Notre Dame. Otherwise, we don't have a very good non-conference either,
Mm-hmm.
which you would think would hurt Michigan. But so other than Will, we all agree Michigan at 2.
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, I
Yes,
mean,
their best win out of conference is UConn. Like,
the non-conference doesn't matter to me. That doesn't matter. Like everybody's talking about that. Who cares really about the non-conference? What matters is that the SEC is the best conference, right? Everybody always says that. So how can you rank Michigan over Georgia because of one game?
Let's look at Georgia's
Georgia
schedule.
played one bad game. You're looking at Missouri and technically Kent State. Those were their two horrible for. I guess Kentucky.
Kentucky, they
I
look
mean,
terrible
sure,
against
I mean,
too.
you can say all that, but they're not. The committee's not like what we say doesn't really matter at the end of the day because what did the committee rank?
Well, this
Georgia
is
Michigan.
my rankings and not the
I
committee.
feel you. I agree. It's kind of like with Austin ranking Alabama over Ohio State. I mean, our rankings. Like, I'd love to be on the committee and spice things up a bit, man. Put TCU number 1. But at the end of the day, the committee ranked Georgia 1, Michigan 2. It's just the way it is. Georgia's been 1 the whole time ever since they beat Tennessee. They're not going to move them down no matter what unless they lose. And Michigan's played great to see. That Ohio State one was fantastic. They're just not going to do it. The committee's not going to do it.
Because here's the thing: if Ohio State, just for your rankings as an example, let's say Ohio State beats Michigan the same way. Yes, they didn't. I know. Let's say they do. They're not going to rank Ohio State over Georgia for the same reason they didn't rank Michigan over Georgia.
The
I
Illinois
know,
game was
I
a
know,
major
it's
struggle for Michigan.
yes, that was the
Jackson
main
is
thing.
getting sleepy.
Yeah, I'm a little bit. Thunderstorms do that to me where I'm at.
It's
So
storming down
let
there.
me ask y'all this.
It's raining. Heard some rumbling.
Let me ask you guys this.
Thunderstorms.
Go ahead, Austin.
So other than Will, do we all have Georgia number 1?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Georgia's
Okay,
number
so
one.
So my only question is what would be the argument against Georgia? I know all four of us have Georgia 1 and Will doesn't, but what would be the argument if we're going to play devil's advocate? What would be the only thing holding Georgia?
Probably the fact that they've played down to their competition too often, whereas Michigan has played down to their competition, but the only competition they played down to was Illinois, and Illinois was coming in off of 2 losses after being on a screeching hot streak. Like, if Illinois didn't, yeah. But I mean, it's like Alabama. Alabama shouldn't have had so many close games. They played down to their competition. And that's where the SEC is at right now. As a whole, I think they're playing down to each other.
Was anybody close to putting Michigan over Georgia besides Will? I know I wasn't.
Not really.
Right
I mean,
on.
it's the SEC, man. I don't like saying that. Just the SEC, SEC. Like, I don't like doing that.
Alright.
I mean, the committee. I went with mostly what the committee did, not because I like what the committee does, but I mean that's just the way it is. Georgia
I'm gonna
was
make
not
another
going to move
argument
below
about
Michigan.
why I'm gonna make an argument against that. This is what I would tell the committee. Georgia only played one of the other top 15 SEC schools in Tennessee. They didn't play LSU and they didn't play Alabama.
They haven't yet.
Well, they're gonna play LSU, but that shouldn't affect. Oh no, we lost.
Oh crap! They were gonna play.
That shouldn't affect the rankings now because they haven't played them yet.
I mean, I don't know. Overall, Georgia's resume just stacks up better than Michigan's. And here comes out my bias again. Yes, unless I legally have to, as an Ohio State fan, I cannot put Michigan at number 1. You realize I would have to go take my scissors and cut my tongue off if I put Michigan at number 1.
I was tempted to put
played
Michigan
Oregon
number 1,
as
but I was
well.
like, not going to play that game for now.
Georgia played Oregon as well.
True.
Yes.
That's
and
the
they
most
destroyed
dominant win of both of between the both teams, Michigan and Georgia. That's the most dominant win for both teams. Georgia blew the doors off. It was week 1, I understand, but see, that's the argument factor. Michigan barely beat Illinois a week before Ohio State. Granted, Blake Corum. Granted, looking ahead. These are all arguments everybody can use. But the argument still lies. The committee ranked Georgia number 1. It's the SEC. They're not going to rank Michigan over Georgia. They're just not going to do it. The only time they had Georgia below a team was because an SEC team was ahead of them, and they were waiting for Georgia to beat Tennessee just so they could put Georgia number 1.
But Will, I respect your argument, though. I can totally see why Michigan would be 1. Just in our opinion, Georgia's number 1. They've been the best team all year, and I think it'll stay that way.
Yeah.
The only way I would go against the committee, personally on a ranking is if they're just flat out wrong. I mean, I don't think they've been bad. Like the rankings that they've done are pretty you can't really argue it that bad. I mean, can anybody at least say the top 6? Can anybody argue it? Is it arguable to the point where they're wrong? The top 6 rankings the committee did. I don't see a problem with it. It's fair. Even if you disagree
One or
with
two parts, but that's neither here nor there.
But it's not like
Gerald also
egregiously
makes a great
bad.
point. Gerald also makes a great point. He's like, great teams have close calls every now and then. Like, how many games has Michigan? How many games have they actually just, besides the Ohio State game, like Illinois, they didn't dominate that game. They almost lost that game. Penn State, that game was
They
close until
dominated Penn State.
That was close
no,
until
no, no, no,
halftime.
gentlemen. I disagree. That game was
It was-
close until about the 8-minute mark of the fourth quarter, and then Michigan ran it up. If you watch the game and not just look at the score, you would see that.
Well, yeah, because the talent's similar, but
Maryland was a
Colin
bit
was
of a
better.
close game.
like James Franklin's even worse at adjusting than Ryan Day is.
Yeah, good point, Jackson. Maryland only lost by 7.
Yeah. Iowa was close until the fourth quarter, I believe.
They were tied with Indiana.
And see, that's
at half.
another thing.
I just like giving
Sorry,
the other side of the
Jeffrey,
argument, but I don't know. I mean,
That's
I feel like
another
they're
thing
pretty-
that gets me. Sorry, Will. Whoops.
Oh, my mistake. Iowa wasn't close, but it was looking close, but it really wasn't a close one. Yeah, my error.
The final scores can be deceiving. Like Alabama, not Alabama, excuse me, Georgia. They beat Missouri by 4. Do we really believe Missouri was that good of a team? No,
I
but on that
kind
game,
of made that point earlier when I said Tennessee beat them 60-something to 24. I think 66-24.
Mhm.
So are we saying Tennessee's better than Georgia based off the fact that Tennessee beat Missouri by more? No, that's not how it works. Head to head doesn't matter.
no,
It
I
just
wasn't
doesn't
saying
matter.
that,
I would
Jeffrey. I
still,
wasn't
even
saying
if
that at
Georgia had a
all.
loss to Missouri, I would still think Georgia's a better team than Tennessee. It just so happens Georgia played really, really bad against Missouri. They just played bad.
It goes to the point that I made. They played down to their opponent's level.
Yeah, Jeffrey, I wasn't saying Tennessee was better than Georgia. I want
No,
you to
I know you
understand
weren't.
that. But
I know you weren't. I was just arguing the point.
Yeah.
You're good.
All right, gentlemen. With that being said, this has been our reaction to the college football top 25, and we have given our rankings. Some of us in some areas were close. I think most of us within the regions that they break it up into, or the groupings they break it up into. I think overall we were mostly somewhere along the lines of the committee. I think we all did a good job tonight. We will be back here on Thursday for our championship week pick'em. Please come back and join us, and everybody have a good night.
Good night,
make sure to like
everybody.
and subscribe, everybody. See you all
Go
Thursday night.
Trojans, fight on.
Bye, everybody.
Ew, Mike. That's gross.
Go Horned Frogs. Hopefully you win.